Okay, it is 6:01 on Monday, November 6th. I'm going to call to order the Winooski Liquor Control Board meeting. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Deputy Mayor Thomas Renner.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have one regular item. Welcome, Jenny.
Good evening. So this is just a new license for Specs. They added the tobacco license
These are the folks we approved last meeting, right?
last meeting. So that's all this is, just a straight tobacco.
Any questions from council? Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the tobacco license for Specs LLC?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Charlie, second by Thomas. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. That is the end of the Liquor Control Board agenda. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion by Aurora, second by Bryn. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay. 6:03 p.m. I am calling to order the Winooski City Council meeting. First up is agenda review. I do have one proposed change from staff. Item D, the draft updates to Ordinance Chapter 9 was posted for discussion, but we have an option to set a public hearing, and that would require approval. Would you all be in favor of updating that item to include approval?
Yes.
Yes.
Can I have a motion from someone?
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Thomas, second by Charlie. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay. Any other agenda order concerns? Okay. Next up is public comment. So this is space reserved for any public comment on an item not on this evening's agenda. If you are here for the public hearing, for instance, or something else on the agenda, would ask you to hold off for that. Is there anyone here with public comment? Please join us at the table and introduce yourself.
Good evening. My name is Felipe Hoyos. I live on Hickok Street, and I'm here to speak principally on some of the other topics. But I've been in conversation with John Rauscher since early in the year, probably January or February, about the lights out front from the Memorial Library. They are unlike any other street light in the city. They're extremely bright, and they shine through my window. In fact, they illuminate probably everything in its vicinity. They impact a lot of neighboring buildings, and I'm wondering if it can be addressed, if the lights can be switched out for some of the more standard ones that you see on all other streets. Yeah, it's a real nuisance.
Thank you. We have John in attendance via Zoom. John, are you able to respond?
Yep, I can. I'm actually in the back office, so I can meet you if you want to chat further out in the lobby. Yeah, so basically, we did reach out a while back to our electrician who retrofitted those lights because on the other side, we received complaints from the folks in the OCC that they were too dim, especially when they were coming into their office space. So they were upgraded to LEDs, I'd say like a year ago. And you're absolutely correct. There's a lot of, they seem to be throwing, light outside of the footprints of the property. So we did ask the electrician to look at retrofitting some downward guards on those lights. So last I spoke with the electrician, they were going to have to retrofit some guards on those lights so they're more downward facing. I will reach out to them because I have not heard an update where they are with that. And obviously the weather's getting a little worse. So ideally he'd get those on before, the snow starts hitting the ground. So yeah, ball's in my court. I'll follow up with the electrician and see where they're at with that.
Thank you. And for the same reason that the weather's changing, the leaves dropped, so now there's no sort of barrier between them and my house.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Okay. Anyone online? You could use the raise hand or chat feature if you wish to speak on something not on tonight's agenda. Okay. We'll move to our consent agenda. We have our minutes from our October 16th meetings, payroll warrants for October, accounts payable for November, interim financing update for Main Street Revitalization, and professional services amendment, and the Working Communities Challenge Grant Extension Amendment. Were there any questions from council? Bryn, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, I'd like to remove item E.
Sure, we'll pull E and put that at the end of this evening's agenda.
Thank you.
Become the new item J. Any other concerns about consent?
No.
I was wondering if we could pull item F.
All right. Anything else? Okay. Do I have a motion to approve items A through D?
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Aurora, second by Charlie. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Council reports. Bryn, would you like to go first?
Sure. So this past month, we had a joint commission meeting with the infrastructure and finance. At a broad level, just started talking about FY25 financing, capital expenditures and needs, must-do items and other items that have been pending for a long time. It was kind of table-setting conversation, anticipate getting into the weeds a bit more. Our next joint meeting is next Tuesday, the 14th. Will be a meeting on the Finance Commission schedule for that. So look for details through the Front Porch Forum and other city channels where we provide notice for that. Anyone and everyone that has interest is welcome to attend those meetings or provide comment ahead of time. The Bridge Committee has not met in October. We don't have a meeting scheduled yet. Anticipate, well, they're presenting tonight, so I'm sure we'll hear more about their timing for the next meeting as well as next public hearing. Airport Commission met last week. A lot of the standard agenda items. The Technical Advisory Committee for the noise exposure map update, they met in September, early October, I think actually. There's no second meeting scheduled yet, but I've requested that it's posted on the BTV Sound website when it is scheduled. I want to just continue to remind folks that if there are any questions or concerns to let me know, and of course let the commission know as it relates to the noise exposure map update, sound complaints, etc. So I think that's that for my end.
Certainly. On October 26th and 27th, I went to the 2023 Apiary for Movement Builders, which was a conference put on by the Vermont Office of Racial Equity. I was able to attend both days along with Chair Silver from Inclusion and Belonging, and we were able to attend workshops such as Essential Concepts for Data Equity, Inclusion, Inclusive Recruitment, Onboarding and Retention, and reflecting on DEIJ and strategic planning, as well as attending an ideal Vermont check-in, looking back at the past year and providing feedback on ways that the Office of Racial Equity might be able to support municipalities better in the future. We have a meeting scheduled with City Manager Wong later this week to review and share what was learned over the course of those 2 days. Safe, Healthy, Connected People meets on the 14th of this month. Inclusion and Belonging does not meet this month. However, ambassadors should be attending the other commission meetings. I ask that my fellow councilors do what they can to ensure the ambassadors feel a sense of belonging and empowerment on the commissions they are ambassadors to. And if there are any concerns, please reach out to Jenny and myself.
Thank you. my only update is that Planning Commission began reviewing the impacts of the Homes Act on our local regulations. So they just started that conversation at their last meeting. After tonight's agenda, we'll be able to provide some additional guidance for that. Thomas.
At Downtown Winooski's last meeting, they discussed some grants that they're pursuing, some current grants that they are working on, and they also talked about the upcoming bridge construction and just general business concern about what that might look like for them. We also, we haven't met this month yet, but we'll be meeting next week. But I did want to thank everybody who participated in pumpkin carving or pumpkin gutting or putting the pumpkins out or lighting the pumpkins, especially lighting the pumpkins because that was very difficult this year. But Winooski's Halloween celebrations drew in more people than they did last year. It was really, really great. We saw so many kiddos participating in trick-or-treating and just a lot of folks having fun. So thanks everybody who helped work on that. Blingo is back tomorrow, actually, at Archives from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. And we have a date for the Winooski Holiday Pop-Up Shop. So just like last year, various Winooski storefronts will be hosting different local artists from the Winooski area and around Vermont. And that will be November 30th from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. Thank you.
Yeah, mine's pretty quick. The Winooski Housing Commission met on October 24th. Unfortunately, I was unable to attend because of an emergency last minute. I have a meeting with Jasmine next week to set the agenda for the November meeting, which will be held on the 28th. And I'll have more to share at the next meeting.
Thank you. All right, city updates, Elaine.
Thanks. So the Battle of the Badges blood drive is happening soon, which is the Winooski Fire and Police Departments host a blood drive at the Winooski Senior Center. That's going to be on Friday, November 17th from 12 to 5 p.m. Community members are encouraged to schedule their donation appointment and support our public safety staff as they compete to see which department donates the most. Visit the news update section of winooskivt.gov for details. Join us and the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission for the LaFountain and Dion Street presentation on Wednesday, November 15th, 6:30 p.m. here at Winooski City Hall. This project is designed to explore potential street reconfigurations along LaFountain and Dion Street based on public feedback. The presentation will include an overview of alternatives and comparisons of the project's needs, costs, safety and mobility improvements, anticipated impacts, and permitting requirements. Community feedback is needed to make this project a success. For more information, please visit ccrpcvt.org. And lastly, Main Street Revitalization. The first official Main Street Revitalization project email update went out last week. Community members are encouraged to sign up for these updates via email by visiting winooskivt.gov/Main Street. If you're new to the project, be sure to check out the information page on our website to learn more about the upcoming work to revitalize this important quarter of our city.
Thank you. Okay, we are into our regular items. First up is the public hearing for amendments to the Unified Land Use and Development Regulations. Eric, could you be so kind as to do a brief summary of the proposed changes?
Sure. First of all, thank you very much. What I was going to do is give a quick overview kind of where we've been to this point as well and highlight some of the changes. So these are amendments to various sections of the Unified Land Use and Development Regulations that the Planning Commission has been working on for probably the better part of the last year, if not longer. These amendments were first introduced to you back in June at your regular meeting on June 5th. You then had a detailed discussion on the amendments at your regular meeting on July 17th, which led to the first public hearing on September 5th. There was, following that hearing, some additional changes were proposed, some modifications, I would say, were proposed, which led to another detailed discussion at your regular meeting on October 2nd, thereby leading to tonight's public hearing to take additional comments. So this will be the 5th meeting that you've had in one form or another to discuss these amendments. Subsequently, back at their regular meeting on October 26th, the Planning Commission reviewed the changes that are incorporated into tonight's agenda and updated the statutory report, basically identifying compliance with the city's master plan and other goals and policies. So the Planning Commission has concurred with that report. So tonight's meeting is really to review the amendments and take any public comments, with the possibility of taking formal action tonight as well as a separate agenda item. So primarily the amendments tonight are focusing on some cleanup, some clarifications and changes for sections 4.1 through 4.12. The bulk of that is coming in section 4.12 related to parking, both for vehicle and adding in new regulations for bicycle parking, both long-term and short-term bicycle parking. There's also, we've updated some of the options for relief for parking with our transportation demand management strategies, shared parking, location of parking, things of that nature. So those are included as well. There's also some clarification and moving of some information from the parking section into our site plan review section in Article 6, specifically section 6.6. We've added some new definitions, and we've also added a new section 5.15 to include options for adaptive reuse of historic structures in the various zoning districts to provide some additional relief for property owners that choose to preserve some or all of those properties. So as I mentioned, this is the 5th time you all have discussed these amendments tonight. So I'm happy to take any questions or comments or provide any additional information on what's included. But otherwise, as I mentioned, there's a separate item after this for potential action on these amendments.
Okay, thank you, Eric. So this public hearing has been noticed for amendments to the Unified Land Use and Development Regulations. At this time, I would like to open the public hearing. I'll invite public comment. If you do have a question, feel free to ask it as well. We have a number of people in here and on Zoom, so I would ask you to keep your comments to a couple of minutes so that everyone has a chance to speak. We'll start in the room and then move to folks on Zoom. So whoever would like to speak first, I could start here in the front. I would invite you to come up here, state your name, and then share your thoughts.
Good evening. My name is Nicole Mace. I've been a Winooski resident since 2009. I also serve on the Winooski Housing Authority Board, the Champlain Housing Trust Board, and the Winooski School Board of Trustees, but I am not representing any of those entities in my comments tonight. They are mine alone. Back in 2015, when form-based code was adopted and I was on the city council, I expressed concerns that redevelopment would lead to the loss of affordable housing and that the incentives built into the code would be insufficient to prevent the displacement of Winooski residents. We have now almost 10 years worth of data to show that these concerns were legitimate. What we did not foresee back in 2015 was the severity of today's housing crisis, which has rapidly accelerated the pace of displacement. When we do not build affordable housing, and existing housing is replaced with options that are either too small or too expensive, or both, our residents are forced to leave. This displacement is disproportionately impacting our BIPOC immigrant families. In 2022, the council commissioned an equity audit. One of the findings is the approach to housing management, and they characterized that approach as a "our hands are tied" mentality. But this approach generates trauma for BIPOC residents and students. The city's awareness of housing issues and the actions taken to remedy these issues have not been inclusive of BIPOC and New Americans' concerns and have been insufficient to effect change. I applaud the council for efforts undertaken to respond to some of the issues laid out in the equity audit, such as tenant education and resource connection, and a focus on housing quality. Unfortunately, I fear that focusing on tenant rights and housing qualities may be a factor leading to the increase in landlords selling their properties or evicting tenants so that they can rehab their properties and charge market rate rent. It's happening all over the city, displacing Winooski families, as other folks here in this room can attest to tonight. Over a year ago, I addressed the Planning Commission to urge immediate action to address the lack of affordable family housing in Winooski. In my view, the changes under consideration currently do not begin to respond to the magnitude of the crisis. Put simply, it has taken too long to do too little. If we continue to lose affordable family housing, we will lose what makes Winooski a unique and special place: its socioeconomic, cultural, and linguistic diversity. It will also cost us more. We built a school for 1,000 kids based on demographic projections that predate 2015. Our new education funding formula prioritizes funds to support multilingual learners. The more school-aged children we lose, the higher our education tax rate will get. There are policy tools available to the council. Your hands are not tied in order to respond to the clear need to build affordable family housing. There are trade-offs that need to be considered, but we should not let analysis cause paralysis. The identity of this community is at stake. The values of this community are at stake. Please treat this issue with the urgency and seriousness that it deserves. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Patrice Lumumba, and I'm the Wellness Coordinator for the Winooski School District. I'm here because I'm advocating for families and students at the district. This year, we were able to launch a housing initiative because families are struggling with housings. I come from this community. Families are struggling because they're all compounding in small spaces. I hope that the city council and the city can look into building more affordable housing for families. Just this year alone, we have 16 families that we are working with, and I'm working with Jenny Davis, who work at Champlain Valley Union. Every single Tuesday, we have family that comes in and complain about how small their housings are and how they're all in one big families, and they can't go anywhere because the space is too small. We are struggling to move this family out to bigger units. For instance, we have a family of 11 people in a 3-bedroom place. I mean, we can't move them anywhere. Even if we try to move them anywhere, the landlord doesn't want them to move it in a 4-bedroom place because it's too small for them. So I hope that the city can look into ways and logistics how we can build bigger space for families, because we come from a family that it's not only 2 of us, it's at least 11 of us. And we want to make sure we have a space where our children feel safe. If a fire comes, family can evacuate safely, right? We just don't want to put a family of 11 in this 3-bedroom place and they can evacuate safely. So I highly recommend that we look into that, because we have many, many families in my district right now that are struggling for affordable housings. Yes, we have housing and stuff, but some of them are small. They might be affordable, but we need many bigger affordable housing for our families. So that's the reason why I'm here, and I hope that that could be considered in the long term for our families.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for giving us the time to speak. The co-founder is the Winooski Parents and Students Project here. It's a grassroots community organizing initiative led solely by immigrants and refugees from many ethnic groups: Somali, Nepali, Congolese, Burundi, Arabic, Latin American communities, Korean, Burmese, etc., and many others. This is a topic for me that is very emotional, because the project has lost huge leaders due to housing. The other co-founder, the reason why Winooski Parents and Students Project actually exists is no longer living here. He was one, it was devastating to me personally to lose my partner, like my camarada, my person on the fight, the ones that we went to. He was doing outreach with me, door to door in Elm Street, every time, every day, not even earning anything, because we were in a transitional process where we were finding a foundation to get some money and resources for this initiative. And they moved. We're still in touch. They begged me to go visit them. They have a beautiful house in Pennsylvania with a pool. I'm actually jealous. I want to move, but I will help the displacement cost if I did, but I'm tempted, and they're trying to convince me. But I'm just letting you know that, like him and his whole family, who literally adopt me, they fit me when I was doing community organizing, and down there, they were like, grab me and literally pull me out and sit me down and put food in front of me and don't let me go until I was done eating, and they will fit me. And if I finish it, they will put more food on my plate, and they just take care of me. In other words, what I was doing that work, and it was too devastating for me to see them go, but at the same time, I understood. I understood. They want the best for their kids. The school wasn't really good for what they wanted it. Their expectations for the kids were high, like any parents, right? Have a good expectation, high expectation for the kids, and they were. That was not the case for them, and it bothered me because the one who started all, who wanted it to see those buses more than me, probably on the street, wasn't able to be here to see those buses running and don't have their kids utilizing those buses. But because of him, because of his tenacity, his determination, and his commitment to the community, those buses are running, and he's not able to even enjoy it. And it bothered the hell out of me. This is what is happening to our community members in Winooski. I do not live in Winooski. I do work 100% for Winooski, and you all know it. And the people who have left, they were not the only case, but there was the one who really hurt me the most because he was more invested probably than me, and I'm super invested in this. And to see him go, it really hurt my soul. And I think was one of the days that I met Nicole. He cried for other reasons, but I cried that night too because they were leaving a week after. And that I was in a hurry to have those buses. But yes, it was really horrendous to see them go. And like them, there are many others that have left. They were strong community members. They couldn't enrich so much this community, but they're gone now. They're gone because the apartments are not only small, but the apartments are in terrible condition. The landlords are not doing much, and I don't understand why we don't have supervision or anything that can, prevent us to have a procedure where we, make those landlords accountable. They are charging every month their money, and they're getting paid, and they are not having those apartments in well condition. Why? Why? I'm asking you why. Let's not even talk about the number of units. The units that are available are not even in appropriate conditions to be safe for kids, for any family. So let's even start from there, and then also speed up a little bit of the process to allow or facilitate other organizations that can build decent places for low income. And this is what it made Winooski great, the diversity. And we are losing it at light speed. It took us so long to get here, but it's not taken us any time to be as wide as any other rural area in Vermont. And it's on you. It's on you. Sorry, but it's on you. And if you don't do anything about it now, that's gonna happen. And it's gonna be on you. We're here to help. We wanted to support this. We wanted to work with you and the community. Let us know, what do you need to move this forward? Thank you.
Thank you, Carly.
Thank you for letting me speak. I will just whatever everyone said, I just emphasize it. But my first suggestion is there any initiative that Winooski had ever talked to a developer and to make housing better than what we have? There are a lot of houses, new houses, but those are not helping us as new Americans, because we are big families and new apartments are all one or two, which that segregates us from the rest of us to live in those apartments. And I would suggest again, if you guys can have initiative of suggestion any developers, make it easier, and then add in, we needed this kind of apartments in this place because majority of people who live here, they can't go into 2 or 1 apartment bedrooms. And what I see here, I observed around here, we have a lot of houses here. We have new houses here, new apartments built, but none of those we can't move to because they are 1 or 2 apartments. So that's my request. If you guys next time suggest the developers to, consider these people who live here. I came to Winooski 2010, January 15, and it's my second home, which I will never forget because it was very cold, and I came from Kenya, which is hot. And I lived in West Street for 6 years, which I'll never forget because that's my second home, and it's gonna be forever, even if wherever I go, I'm gonna remember it. So I will please help these people because this is their home. They don't know where else to go. And most of us, we scared if we go out of Chittenden County, which we all help each other and come, and language barriers. Only we have maybe 10% who speaks English, and the other 100 people live on this, their life lies on these people for anything they need help. So if one of us move out of there, they don't have help, which I think I speak Christine before, that every year 15 people move out of here, which when they move in, they're crying because they love the state, they love the city, but they can't leave because of housing problem. They must, nothing else. Those are the problems why they're moving out of here. And then the one which go there, they call back. They told them how nice and easy and cheaper and everything is better than here. And the city where they move also consider them. Honestly, I talked to them personally over the phone and asked them what service they get. They were very considered as, welcomed. The city takes care of them, that the landlords will not harass them. That's one thing they told me, that the landlords are not harassing them because the city has code of conduct that they can't, they have a policy that they can't move out. Or they will tell, oh, you can call this number if you have a problem, and then we'll help you. Where we don't have it here, the number to call. Leave of that, I don't think there's any one of us even come to the city to talk to any problem. So I will say, I know it's a small city where we don't have a lot of spaces and a lot of, money or whatever it is. But if the little we have, if we do well and know the problem of the resident here, I'm sure you will help. And you just need to know, I'm sure, a lot of problem that we're sharing here, which is a long time problem. So please consider this community and help them to get a home. Thank you.
I'm back. In June 2023, Governor Phil Scott signed the Housing Opportunities Made for Everybody Act. This landmark piece of legislation, made possible by tripartisan collaboration, is designed to broadly limit the barriers that exist to addressing this state's acute housing crisis, right, that we've heard just now from 4 different witnesses. The intentions of the Home Act have merely set the floor, but this seems to have been lost on our Planning Commission. The proposed amendments to the ULUDR appear to try as hard as possible to abide by the bare minimum of requirements set by the Home Act. This ought to be outrageous to all of us here. Nowhere in the state does it make more sense to increase density than in our great city. We have no opportunity for expansion or undeveloped lands to build on. If we want to increase our tax base, increase the utilization of our school campus, or otherwise continue to be a home to diversity of backgrounds and incomes, we have no choice but to build up. I am pro-density because I love my neighbors and I want more of them, and we seem to be losing them. Because I think our local businesses deserve to thrive and grow, because it's better to walk and bike to places than to drive, because the state is number 2 in homelessness in the entire country, and that's a shame. Because if we don't do it, then who will? Furthermore, it's simply unfair to limit, and this is getting to specifics, it's unfair to limit development of multi-unit housing to the downtown core and gateways. It should not be the case that if you want an affordable place to live in Winooski, you must live in the busiest and loudest corners of our city. All this serves to do is segregate our neighborhoods. Changes may be hard, but the alternative to change is sclerosis, and that is even harder. I'm dismayed that I have to keep showing up and express my regret at a series of decisions and discussions that were counter to the agreed upon solution to our number 1 problem. That problem is insufficient homes in places where people want to live. The solution is more homes in exactly those places. People would like to live in Winooski, Vermont's Opportunity City. It says right there. We should facilitate that. And I understand, based on his comments, Mr. Vorwald is somewhat exasperated, and maybe the rest of the Planning Commission is somewhat exasperated by the amount of back and forth. But simply, the bare minimum is not enough. I mean, we got to go above and beyond. Eliminate minimum lot sizes, eliminate parking requirements. This city can't build on its own, right? We are relying on people with capital to go in and access sites and build up there. And if we want the kind of multifamily, multi-bedroom housing that people have expressed a need for, we have to reduce the barriers that exist for that. And principally that's cost. So we just simply have to make it cheaper to build in this city, and we have to make it easier to build in more places. We cannot restrict this growth into a small number of places. That's all.
Thank you. Is there additional public comment in the room? Please come up. And if you could introduce yourself.
Sure. Well, evening. My name's Tom Buckley. I live on Hall Street, and I'm here on a somewhat different topic, but the same proposed changes that you're looking at. I've done, over the years, I've done a number of volunteer things for the city of Winooski, but tonight I'm a member here as a member of a fairly new organization, the Winooski Alliance for Active Transportation. It's really a group, it's a grassroots group that's trying to help move forward the adoption and proliferation of alternatives to fossil fuel transportation, basically. And I'm just here on behalf of the discussion that we've had to support the changes to the parking ordinance, specifically the bike parking. But I also think laced throughout the changes here are a number of positive things that will help as development goes forward to reduce fossil fuel use, or at least encourage the use of alternative transportation. So we're just here to encourage your adoption, and thank you for bringing it forward. I know it's been a lot of work, and we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Sure.
Would anyone else in the room like to speak on this topic? I'll do a second call after I invite anyone who is attending via Zoom. If you can use the raise hand feature or the chat, we can add you to the meeting to share a public comment about the proposed land use regulations amendments. Okay. Last call for public comments. Okay, seeing no additional comment, I will now close the public hearing. And we will move to item B, which is the discussion and potential improvement of these amendments. So, building off of Eric's table setting, these changes have been worked on for like a year-ish or so by Planning Commission. They do include new bicycle parking, incentives for adaptive reuse, for EV parking, and some public transit stuff, and added shared use, which could provide some of like relief for development. We heard from planning commissioners before at the previous meeting about there not being drastic changes related to parking here in this version, as they're going to be reviewing our regulations related to the Homes Act, which will reduce our minimums, our base minimums, and then also means we need to rethink the incentives that we have right now for priority housing. So I think there is an option here to adopt what we have today and then provide additional direction for the work that is coming in the future, or actually has just started and will be getting future changes for. But open to any further comments or questions from you all.
I'm concerned that if we approve this today, that it will never get back on the table that we discussed building units with more bedrooms in them. I've heard over and over again that it's not viable because contractors won't do it because they don't make money on it, but that's just not an answer. We've heard from so many different angles that that's what we need in our community, and that's been the one thing that I've said every time that we've had this conversation. We need 4 and 5 bedroom units in our community. We have to figure out a way to get them.
I think you started to make a sound before.
Okay. I agree that these are far from, I think, what we need, but I'm hoping that we can improve. I'm in favor of approving them tonight to hopefully give a little bit relief and to kind of be able to then move on to the discussions related to the Homes Act. And I think through that we can really dig into the multi-bedroom, as Charlie said, the 4 and 5 bedroom. I don't want this to clog us getting to that conversation, I think is more my concern. I would hope that this does provide incentives, but we definitely need stronger ones. And I think that's the next step with the Homes Act.
Yeah, Aurora, I think I agree, and I'm very sorry to you all that you came here thinking that we haven't done enough for housing. I recall some discussions where we pushed for more incentives and pushed for less parking, and that's where I think we've ended up in this back and forth with this document 5 times, you said, Eric, or something like that. The last time we discussed this, we talked about the fact that it has been coming back and forth, and we do have this legislation from the state that we have to consider. So I would agree with moving this forward as is, but really trying to put what we want, going above and beyond of what home does make us do for this next round of conversations, and try to start it at a place where council and the residents of Winooski are really hoping for it to be at.
I'd like to make a motion and move to adopt the proposed ordinances as presented to us tonight.
Second.
Motion by Bryn, second by Thomas. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Mike? Yeah, yeah.
Hello, everyone. And for folks who don't know me, I'm Michael Bryan, and I'm currently the chair of the Planning Commission. So I appreciate your comments. There is frustration, I think, all around on how slow these changes are coming, but we have, as you said, Christine, or Madam Mayor, I'm sorry. We have been discussing this for well over a year and trying to take into consideration, you know, all the stuff that comes with changing regulations. It's very difficult we can't legislate what size properties are built. All we can do is incentivize them. That's what we've tried to do. And I would hope that if someone has specific ideas that they think will help, to come to the Planning Commission and talk to us, instead of after the fact hearing you're not doing anything. Like I said,
You brushed me off earlier this year.
I don't know your name, sir. You didn't introduce yourself.
My name is Felipe Hoyos. I spoke in favor of eliminating parking minimums.
Yeah.
And you said we're not that kind of city. Or something along those lines.
We're not what?
We're not that kind of city. So
I think you misquoted me, but this isn't the time for you and I have discussion. We can have it at the Planning Commission Thursday if you want, okay? Anyway, come to the Planning Commission or send us comments with your ideas of how we can improve things, because we're gonna be talking about Act 47, the Home Act, and how we have to change our zoning to meet that. I'm not sure, I've read through that act a couple times, and I'm not sure, you know, except for the parking minimums and densities, and we already are the densest city, you know, in the state, pretty much in New England. But come to the Planning Commission and give us your ideas, and we can debate them. And understand that you come with an idea doesn't mean that either the council or the Planning Commission is going to adopt them. We're going to discuss them. We'll give them due consideration, and we'll make our decision based on our discussions. So thank you. Again, Thursday night we have a meeting. We have a hearing on the proposed changes for historic preservation, cultural, and archaeological things. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. That is a good segue to our next item, which is on for discussion approval. This is policy direction for Home Act impacts. So, as was mentioned already this evening, the homes, and thank you all for speaking in public hearing. If that's what you wanted to do, feel free to exit. It is not rude or bothersome, but please also feel free to stick around because I think this next item is very much connected. And we'll take public comment as well, additional public comment for every item. So the Home Act was intended to increase affordable and inclusive housing in Vermont. The bill created resources for construction and rehab of affordable housing units. It's intended to prioritize the needs of low-income individuals, families, and vulnerable populations. It also included municipal zoning reforms, lowering parking thresholds, increasing building and lot standards, and permitting both duplexes and quadplexes by right. These changes impact all Winooski. So by December 2024, when this legislation takes effect, our parking minimums will be lowered and quadplexes will now be allowed by right throughout the city. Duplexes currently already are. So this is an opportunity for us. As I shared earlier, the Planning Commission just touched on this at their last meeting, but they'll be working on this for the foreseeable future. Here is an opportunity for us to provide some direction as they approach that work. We heard a lot tonight that I think can inform that. I invited all of you to consider what you would want to see prioritized in that work. And then I also want to invite our city manager to speak to some information that she included in the memo.
So, council's role is to set policy direction. And we do also have some policy direction from the master plan in terms of, you know, quality and affordable housing for all of Winooskians, which includes our larger families. My concern is that, so we just hired we hired a housing initiative director in May. She's been getting her feet under her, been working on certain things. Expanding the housing trust fund, accessibility, short-term rental regulations, things that will make hopefully a bit of difference. What we don't have yet is the data that I think would be needed to inform specific targets. So if council would like to provide direction, and the other thing to note is that as the Planning Commission chair mentioned, this isn't necessarily something that you can zone your way out of. So there could be other things, and in fact what we've heard from developers is like Mike was saying, they can't, or maybe it was Charlie actually, Charlie was saying, they can't afford to build multiple bedroom units, they can't afford to build affordable. So if that's true, to me it's like, okay, well we need to provide the money so that they can do it. We can't necessarily incent our way into it. So it could be that these changes need to be happening in other ways, not necessarily through zoning bylaws. But either way, you know, there's some work that needs to be done by the Planning Commission to explore what the impacts of the Home Act and what we can do and what we need to do. There's other initiatives that the Housing Initiative Director is working on, and she's taking input for certainly on specific ideas or trying to get creative with this problem. I'll also say that we don't necessarily have the data on what the city would be paying for to support that housing. And it could be that it'd be fine. It might not be. So one example is, so Coralie was speaking to the housing units that are not being kept up to our code right now. This is not for lack of action on our code enforcement team's part. They're out there every day trying to get landlords to compliance. Is there a better way to do that? Maybe. With our current rules and our current staff, I think we're definitely doing the best that we can. So the question is, if we were gonna make that system better, what would that cost? We have 2.5 people doing that work right now. If we add, I don't know, if we add 10 more units, how much more work is that? Can we absorb that with our current staff? If it's 100 more units, how much work would that take? How can we absorb that with our current staff? I don't have the answer. And I understand you don't want to let the perfect be the enemy of the good, but we don't have enough of that data right now. We need to be working on a staffing audit this year as it's one of council's priorities for us as staff. And without that, I don't know what this community can necessarily afford to do. And I'm not saying wait forever, I'm saying if you keep the policy if you are inclined to set policy direction now, my recommendation is to make it more general and or open-ended, so that we're not boxed into a corner when we start developing some of those answers to those questions. What can we afford? What is it gonna take? What will it cost to provide the services that come with that housing?
Thank you, Elaine. That is our role, is high-level policy guidance. I think to the Planning Commission Chair's point earlier, if folks have specific individual ideas, that might be better shared in a different format. But I would be happy to kick us off with some thoughts about that policy direction. I think we can, and also to Elaine's point, I think what we're providing now may also provide guidance to our housing commission's efforts. So for example, we know Jasmine has applied for a municipal planning grant to do some of this study. Perhaps that could help with research that could inform some zoning updates, could also inform whether we should be looking at other ordinance, such as replacement ordinance or inclusionary zoning and things of that nature. So it is a multi-pronged issue. But when it comes to the Homes Act and zoning, I personally would like to give some direction that as we work through these changes, we need to, one, be thinking about how to preserve existing affordability, family size units, and home ownership. Two, be thinking about how much stronger incentives for those. I think the incentives that we have in place now have not proven to stimulate much of that housing being added. Number three, I would want to make sure that we are engaging stakeholders, including the Housing Commission, the Vermont Housing Finance Agency, and local builders of both affordable, nonprofit, and private market developers to ensure that the changes we make are functional. And then the fourth thing is, I would like to see us maximize in support of infill. So our master plan states infill as one of our strategies for growth. And so we have duplex by right, and now we're adding quadplex by right. I wouldn't want that to mean, so in theory, a quadplex, it is cheaper to build because of the shared infrastructure, right? Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't want this to mean that now you're putting up one structure of 4 units, but you need 4 times the land in order to put that unit up, versus if it was a single unit development. So I don't want to see any changes that are decreasing density, and think we should allow these changes to actually make an incremental increase. Not so much that it changes, the significant character of the neighborhood. Like, I don't think we need gateway-sized development throughout the community, but we should be working with these changes and not trying to mitigate them in any way.
I do worry about that changing character. Why is that necessarily a bad thing? Especially considering that we know that there is, or that we've heard that there is segregation in our city. Thinking about making all of our neighborhoods more accessible to all of our families seems like a good thing. So I think that's like one of my initial reactions. I'm also kind of concerned that we're gonna shackle ourselves in what ifs and not dealing with, the data that we are getting from our residents. Data is not just money, data is stories. Oftentimes in Vermont, we see these insignificant numbers, or we can't disaggregate data because it's too small. But in that case, we need to use stories. That's the data that fills in when we can't disaggregate the numbers. And the numbers aren't always necessarily telling the stories that we need. I do think there is some data that we need, but one of the things we are applying to a grant to have a housing equity audit. Like, that's data that is important. And I want to hold the importance of that, but also thinking about we can't hold off forever. Like, this is an urgent thing. We have been waiting for, a long time. And I don't want to, I feel like we have this really great opportunity to, make a step forward. And what the Planning Commission, I want to see the Planning Commission bring to us, like, how can we maximize these changes? How can we make sure we have that? And then it does come back to the council, and that's a place where we could bring in additional data. And that's, again, thinking about not just the staffing aspect, but what it would, if we get that grant, what is our kind of looking at equity and housing, looking at our equity audit and housing. We already have some data too. I don't want to disregard data that we already have that feels like it's telling us that we need affordable multi-unit housing. I think there's a concern that I have too of if we do go with like the minimum, then we're almost asking Winooski to continue to be gentrified. I don't want to see Winooski be gentrified. I want to make sure that people are able to stay here, that people aren't pushed out of the state. Like, they're not just unable to stay in Winooski, they're pushed out of Vermont entirely. When Vermont needs young people, Vermont needs families, Vermont needs workers. I can't help but think of, we have these understaffing concerns in some of our departments and in our school. But if we had affordable housing that people can afford when they're making city staff salary, when they're making our teacher salary, which we know is not as high as our surrounding neighbors, we won't get more workers to fill these roles if they can't live here, if they can't have housing here. We have an issue with being able to have enough firefighters that are within a range. Well, why don't we make sure that they can live here? We say that that they can't live outside a certain range to be able to come in and access and make sure that we're responding in a timely manner. We need to make sure that people can live here. So that's one of my big concerns, is we're thinking about, well, how can we take care of the folks with bringing in more density, but how we can't even fully take care of the people. Like, we need workers and we need them to be able to afford to live here. So honestly, that's one of my other things, just thinking about that. And we have this capacity in the school, but the school also needs workers. So there's a lot tied up in there. And I guess where I want to end with is I don't want to, be stuck in that what ifs. What if by some miracle a bunch of developers come and want to put up affordable housing? That sounds wonderful. That is not necessarily going to happen. As you said, we need more incentives. I don't want, like that, the tax number is not, I don't know, that data I think reflects, a very distant what if. I think with these zoning changes, we need to, incentivize affordable multi-bedroom units.
Christine, can I caveat that? So my concern is that housing units of any type, if we grow the amount of housing, we will have to increase taxes to the point where it's the tax bill that becomes unaffordable. The taxes are paying for services. I just want to make that clear that that's the tie that I'm making. That's why I'm talking about money. Obviously, I don't want our families to be displaced from here either. I'm worried that we'll have an unintended consequence if we choose a policy direction that is not mindful of tax impacts on affordability.
I appreciate that clarity.
I want to let council share first before moving back to public.
I wonder if there is a way, you know, as you said, we set a high-level policy. So if our high-level policy is that we want Planning Commission and Housing Commission to work on getting more affordable housing with larger units in Winooski, is it then not the role of staff to weigh that and to make a recommendation that would allow for that to happen with a tax base that makes sense to keep up our services? Like, can we not set our policy, can we not set our high-level policy and then be given a policy that gets us what we need in a way that allows for the tax base to work for it? So if we want...
Sorry, you weren't done, go ahead.
No, that's fine. I mean, and I understand you don't know, but I think, you know, if we look at the last document that planning brought to us, that took a year, you were saying, Mike? Over a year to get that document to us. And you need more time to get this data. I would think that planning coming up with ideas off of our high-level policy desires and the data that you need to come in isn't going to be that far off when they're going to be done their process if this is a year-long process. Hopefully less, but if we're going off of history. I just think, I completely understand. I've had multiple conversations with everyone about services in the city, so I understand what I don't want there to be a case where we don't have enough firefighters, which we're already almost there, for an added population. But I would hope that we can find a way to draft that policy that gives us the taxes that we need in those areas that we're going to be increasing density or increasing height of buildings, so that we can try to provide homes for more folks.
That's the holy grail that we're after as staff. So if you wanted to direct us to do that, we will look for it. When I said I don't know, it's I don't know that we can get there. I don't know if it's possible. But
I think
what we're
that's
looking
something that
for.
we need to figure out later, right? If we're saying here, we want the work of updating zoning to be guided by the preservation of existing priority housing, which we have previously said is affordable, family size, and homeownership opportunity, because those are the things we lack.
Yep.
That we also want a lens of how to create more of those. Those recommendations will come back to us at some point, and then we need to evaluate, is this the right pathway forward? I don't see that we're ever going to know exactly what it costs. Like, clearly more units means more code enforcement, more fire, more police. The decisions we make about like community services programming are less specific, or some of the other programming that we have going on. You know, what is the financial burden? It depends what the mechanism that's created is in zoning or in ordinance, right? Like, that would inform what is the staffing required to administer it. And then there's the staff recommendation to us of this is a good idea or this is not really tenable.
Right. Yeah, I think we'd be really holding ourselves back if we don't ask for a large policy objective from the commissions.
But I think what we can align to here is, we've got this act that is reducing parking requirements and adding quadplexes. Do we want to see that maximized or minimized, or somewhere in the middle in how it's applied? Right, so if parking is already getting reduced, we have existing incentives. Do we want to see those reduced accordingly by the same amount or like percentage? If we're adding quadplexes by right, do we want a quad to have the same land dimensions as 4 single units, or no? I think that's where that is the piece where I think there's a bigger density impact. However, I think we also need to keep in mind that what we set up in here creates options. It's not a requirement. I don't believe we're gonna see a ton of folks convert their properties, you know? When we're talking about residential zoning district, you will have some people that are investor owners or that want to add on, but a lot of people just own their home and they're not going to make a change right away. It's speculation how much impact it will have.
Right, and I think, you know, that is a key point, is that we have to set up the policy that will allow folks to do that. The likelihood is that the neighborhoods are going to maintain the feel that they have and maintain the reason why people moved in there, but we need to be able to create the options for those things. And, you know, the Home Act, in my view, is the minimum of what we should be doing. And I think not only is it the minimum of what we should be doing, but when we're having our discussions about the original proposal that we just spoke about, a lot of us were suggesting things that go further than the Home Act does. So I think we're already kind of mostly in agreement that we wanted more.
I think the other thing to keep in mind is that gateways are where we're seeing more development. And so when we think about preserving existing affordability or family units, that's where there's a mechanism missing, either through an ordinance through the Housing Commission or a zoning incentive or something. Bryn, I'm sorry, I just noticed your raised hand.
Yeah, I mean, there's no rush. You're can kind of fill in conversation as it works out. Some of my questions are related to, so looking through this statute, I guess I just have questions right now, and maybe not necessarily as much of a policy direction. I think I'll get there as I have more clarity of what is included in here and what's not. For example, so quadplexes, but I don't see a bedroom number affiliated, like a bedroom minimum with quadplexes. So it could be 4 1-bedroom units. Is that right?
Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe all the statute does is allow someone to build a quad by right.
That's correct. Yeah, the statute does not have any information on the number of bedrooms or the size of the units. Generally, that is going to be set by what the market is providing and what the market is saying to the developers. We have in our municipal code, we do have minimum sizes for bedrooms, or what needs to be included for it to be considered a bedroom, but there's nothing in the Home Act that would specify the number of bedrooms that need to be included in a dwelling unit.
So that's very helpful to know and understand. So for me, that puts a flag up as a policy opportunity for us, and how we may want to consider, okay, if these quad units are allowed by right, are we able to then incentivize a minimum number of bedroom units with that, or require a minimum number of bedroom units? So again, some policy questions that we can discuss further. I think other questions I have are, so with these statutory requirements on municipalities, does that remove our ability to apply impact fees? So thinking about a lot of the new development happening in South Burlington and the consideration of an educational impact fee. I don't know that we would need an educational impact fee. It's just an example of, we have a rather large amount of capital improvements that we need to address, roads, sidewalks, water lines, sewer, etc. like, at what, you know, to what extent are we able to have some impact fees for these, for developments, so that that does not weigh so heavily on our existing tax base, and encourages that when there is this infill, when there is this new development, it's ready and it's not deteriorating, like it's in good health for when the new units go in and are built. So impact fees is another question, like to what extent, not transportation, since we already know that's extremely hard to access for impact fees, but are there others that we can and should consider ahead of the developments going in? And then infill, like I certainly want to continue to encourage some of the infill. I think that's, you know, come up in DRB in the last year, 2 years or so, relating to setbacks, relating to parking. So I think there are lot sizes that I see that could be subdivided. And is there opportunity there for encouraging more infill? So those are some of the things I think about, at least high level for person policy. I don't know that having, I think Eric, you might have mentioned previously having a single zoning district, no longer having A, B, or C, but having a single zoning district. I would need a lot more information before I'd feel comfortable saying yes to that. But I'll leave it at that for now.
Bryn, I don't believe that anything in this precludes us from exploring impact fees. You do make a interesting point there about perhaps like dimensional reductions as incentives for larger units. But again, I think that's too in the weeds and something that the Planning Commission could look at in service of wanting to maximize these changes to preserve and create priority housing. Questions, comments? Nicole?
I just want to reflect back that it's, as a community member, it's hard to hear concern around development when it comes to affordable properties, when we have seen such rapid development in the gateways in particular, but in other parts of the city, and have not heard those kinds of concerns. And so I just want to reflect that back, that that's a little bit hard to think about now. We're concerned about our fire department. And I know it's been sort of a running theme, but like to place barriers to the preservation of housing that matters to this community by citing that feels a little disjointed to me. And I also want to emphasize, I think home should be a floor, not a ceiling, and that we cannot be thinking only of incentives, because incentives do not work in the market. And there are other tools such as inclusionary zoning, other forms of revenue for the Housing Trust Fund, where if you are going to be a developer in this community, you have to contribute to preserving what makes this community special in one way or another. And that is not through incentives.
Thank you. Sorry, I just got to know, if anyone else wants to speak, please do it through the microphone.
Sorry.
No one on Zoom could hear very well. Come on up.
I would have suggested that we shouldn't run for like immediately 4 bedrooms and such thing like that. We can start from a little bit of 3 bedrooms and then go up like that, because we're a small city. We know it's going to be hard for us to start from that. And then my suggestion is, I don't know how you guys are connected to Champlain Housing. If they're doing a lot of deployment around, if they can help us, you know, to get some of the development around Winooski. I know they did one already, and then they can, if they did do another 2, maybe it will be better. But I will suggest, let's not start with the 4 or 5 bedrooms. Start with the 3 bedrooms, and then little by little we can go up.
Thank you.
For me, I just have 2 questions. The thing is, like I said earlier, I come from this community. The community is very big, right? And Elaine, I just have a question, maybe it's a question for you. I wanna know if putting a family in a three-bedroom, family of 11 in a three-bedroom, it's a city code, if you meet the city code. I just want to know, that's one of my questions. I don't know if that makes any sense, right? I just want to make sure that everybody understands me very clearly. If we place a family of 11 in a three-bedroom place, does that meet the city code, right? Now the question is, if a fire comes in a three-bedroom place, who's responsible for that family, right? So we have to be mindful of that, right? So building bigger, we have to making sure we're thinking about these families, right? So if a fire comes and destroy that family, I want to know who's responsible for those family. Does that meet the city code? That's my question.
John, do you want to take that?
Sure. John Audis, Fire Chief, Director of Code Enforcement. So specifically around the question of number of people in a space, it's square footage per person. And it's, so each space, each unit is going to be different. It's not, every place is the same. And that is in the city code. So we experience a lot of new families coming into Winooski, and they're helped, they're housed, and we don't know that they're bringing a large family into a two-bedroom. There isn't a two-bedroom that's going to, with 11 people. There's just no way that that's going to fit into the city code with the square footages. And they're not a lot in the square footages. We don't go around and measure each room and that sort of thing. We use that as a tool, typically to help mitigate a situation. It's not like we go in through our regular code enforcement pieces and we're pulling out a tape measure and telling people they need to leave the homes. I don't want people to feel like that. But there are instances where people are housed and it's not appropriate square footage. Does that answer questions?
So,
I asked the same question about the city, and they said what they consider.
I'm sorry, sir, could you come up to the microphone, so otherwise the people on Zoom can't hear you?
Yeah, that city code, I asked Burlington City the same thing, and they told me it's only adults to be counted as a code, but if family, mom and dad and their children, what I was told is the landlords scapegoat and bring in that code, but I was told if family, mom, dad, if they have 5, 6 kids and they can live in those kind of apartments. I don't know about that code with Winooski, if they have a different code that says, okay, this is the square foot and this is the number of people who can live, which I think that need to be changed since we have large families joining to the city. If there's no many adults, there's only dad and mom and then the children, I don't understand why we have to have a code that prohibits them to live together, the family.
I think a few things come to mind and I just want to get to the kind of the basis of your question. I think in current state, and Chief, correct me if I'm wrong, if we were to follow the code on a lot of these homes that you go into, technically the families who are living there shouldn't be living there in those numbers. But because you're not 100% like measuring and everything, you're allowing folks to stay where they live and not putting them in a situation where they need to try to find a new house.
That's correct. It's a calculated risk, if you will. So we know if there's good detection, good egress, if the square footage number doesn't match, but we have good egress and that sort of thing, then it works. Sorry. We do know that overcrowding taxes the buildings. Most of our buildings are older. The infrastructure within the building isn't able to sustain that sort of overcrowding.
Yeah.
So that's, again, those are the situations where I use the word game day situation, where we go in and, obviously we want to know where the family's at, and, I don't recall since I've been here that we've declared a unit inhabitable or had forced a family to move or anything like that. We've brought in other resources to try to get them housed. Obviously, that was easier in years previous. As the housing market has tightened, it's become harder to get resources.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I think it just speaks to the policy that we want to try to make sure that it's not just incentives, but other factors that will enable for these larger bedroom homes to be built, because we know that folks are living in smaller bedroom homes, which are likely not safe.
All right. I think one of the things I'm hearing from that is if we're thinking about bringing in more housing being a bigger burden on our fire services, it sounds like not having the right housing right now is not only a burden on our fire services, but is endangering our residents. So thinking about just the way that, having the needed housing might actually, make us better fitting code.
Yeah, and so there's an education piece for me too, right? To realize, how bigger families, how they make those spaces work in their family unit. And one piece this community hasn't talked about a lot is residential sprinklers. And everyone thinks they're super expensive, but that is a way to, there's a sprinklered building offers a lot more flexibility, if you will, and allows us to push a little more. So that may be something this community needs to look at in the future as an incentive to help.
Felipe Hoyos. I wanted to echo the mayor's feedback that we should go above and beyond what the Home Act is laying out, that minimum lot sizes for multifamily structures should not be equivalent or anywhere close to 4 times the equivalent density of single-family homes. I also I don't have the numbers with me either, but I believe in my heart of hearts that increasing density means more efficient city services for everybody and improves affordability. I just paid my utility bills and I've paid my taxes, and I'm under no pretense that those things are going to ever go down, but I'd at least like for them to slow down the rate of increase, and I do believe increasing density in the city is going to help with that. I'm really glad the fire chief is here. Sorry, I don't know your name. Yeah, Chief John. As far as the 3+ bedroom multifamily component goes, a lot of, the reason the developers say it doesn't pencil out is largely because of construction costs, or at least that's a huge component of it. And I don't know what the specific ordinances are here, but just from my own casual reading on the topic, I do know that in a lot of places, fire codes will limit multifamily construction of single staircase buildings versus double-ended corridors. And I know that you are in a very conservative industry, and rightly so, but perhaps it's a good idea to bring you into the conversation and talk about how to change the fire code such that this type of structure, this single staircase structure, one of which I grew up in one in Queens, 6 stories tall. They're safe, they're used all over the world, but a lot of times you can't build them in the United States. So that reduces the opportunities for 3+ bedroom units. And that should definitely be another avenue to explore. Is how can we loosen up some regulations, and of course, we want everybody to be safe, and new buildings should have the sprinkler systems, but let's not be onerously restrictive. And perhaps that can help with affordability as well.
Hello again. Couple questions. I believe that the council have to decide what is your priority. Is your priority equity and inclusive and creating more units that are affordable, or your priority is how affordable and how to deal with the money and the stuff? I think that will guide you simply what you need to do. If you set up your priorities straight, it will tell you, can we afford losing more qualified individual? The Winooski Parents and Students Project do outreach and do not only do outreach, but we train individuals to become leaders. We invest on them. And the investment that we have put in many of the individuals that we have recruited has gone out of the window, out of states. Many of them, many brilliant people that could have done amazing things in this community, in this state. I have trained them to go and do great things elsewhere. I have recruited them to do great things elsewhere. Many of them. I just told you of one of many. In fact, one of our bus drivers, a woman from the Somali community, a woman, learned how to drive a humongous bus. I wouldn't even dare. She has the guts to be able to go from dealing with kids. I guess if you're dealing with 3, you can do it at all, but I was so proud of her. She got her driver's license and she moved. That can you, Winooski, and the council, can afford losing more amazing people and displacing more people like we have? What are your priorities? Can we have volunteers? We created a workforce training program to create more bus drivers that can feed the action lack of those kind of careers and professions in place. Can we find more volunteers in our community to become firefighters? I bet you that we can. I bet you that we can find more people to help the lack of staff that you have, or create a more efficient system where you can actually have less staff and do more by going to the low income neighborhoods. You all know where it is, and if you don't know it, I don't know why you're sitting here, because that is the places, those are the places where you should go and do checking on those apartments. Instead of waiting for them to come to you, you go to them. There is a saying, if the mountain doesn't come to you, if you don't go to the mountain, let the mountain come to you, because that needs to happen one way or another. So just responding a couple questions, but at the same time, I'm asking you a question that can respond the way you should be focusing your attention. The problems in the future are in the future. The problems now, that's why you need to resolve now. Whatever you do now is gonna impact many years in the future. It's gonna set up or be staying the way this community is right now, or destroying it altogether, and it's not going back. It's not going back. The decisions that you're making right now are determinant. And you know that. And if you don't know it, please realize how important it is, because As we speak, we are losing people, amazing people. Can we afford more of that? If not, let's do whatever it takes to get those units in place, to set it up ourselves, to actually know for the problems that we have now, for the upcoming people who have. We need more youth people. What is Vermont thinking? What is Vermont thinking? Development is the way of creating more opportunities so we can stay here. The good people who are able to come out of better ideas of how to live better or a higher standard of living somewhere else, they pack and move. I have somebody who's moving tomorrow to Miami. Tomorrow. So it's like every minute you're wasting is more people that are leaving. Just see it that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Based on this discussion, I have drafted potential language we could vote on. I'm gonna try to share my screen here.
I wonder, for in addition to this, we have our equity assessment worksheet that we put together, and one of the things we have on here is that it can be used by commissions if requested by council. Can we request that the planning commission use the equity assessment worksheet?
Or should we also request the same thing of the Housing Commission?
Yeah, I'm gonna put it for both.
Yeah. Yeah, because the first question with our clarifying purpose is what does the proposal seek to accomplish? Will it reduce disparities and discrimination? Does it align with our strategic vision and master plan goals? And does it address items in the equity audit? So I think just having those questions will be good.
Mayor?
Yeah, Bryn, is that you?
Yep. I'd like to add, or for discussion, consider adding, directing staff to explore impact fees.
Safety impact fee on the priorities and strategies. I would not want to ask them to explore additional ones until our next prioritization session.
I would disagree, but I'd ask the other counselors what they think about exploring other impact fees. In addition to public safety, looking at additional impact fees to improve infrastructure related to sidewalks and roads.
Councilor Oakleaf, would that request be better to ask the Housing Commission to explore those fees?
It requires staff
Not really? Okay.
initially.
Yeah.
Unless-
I was suggesting staff.
I wonder if this, because I think there's definitely interest there. I wonder if that's a different conversation though. Because this is very much focused on our commission direction. If we want to talk about staff direction, I think that needs more input from the city manager.
I would agree with that, and that this is very specific to commission direction in regards to the Home Act.
Yep.
If we want to talk about impact fees, I think we do need to warn that separately. Are there other thoughts? Does this feel like the right direction to provide?
I think so.
I would like maybe to specifically name, I'd really like the commission to look at how much land area for development could be gained by reducing lot minimums. I know that's a little bit more specific than the general directions, but I think that's something that's really worth looking at as we go into the next year or so.
I believe Eric has already done that work.
Can I find that on the city website?
Probably not.
Eric, are you still with us? Is that accurate?
So, yeah, actually, I was just getting ready to log off to go to another meeting, but some of the work has been done. It is not published on the website. It's mostly been used in the context for informing some of the planning commission discussions. It depends on what specific information you'd be looking for. It's something we can do. It's just a matter of how much detail you're interested in and what specific information you're looking to get.
Okay, thanks. I can email you.
Would anyone like to make a motion to approve this language as direction to provide to our commissions?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Aurora, second by Charlie. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Did you say an aye, Bryn? I didn't hear you.
I didn't raise my hand, sorry.
Okay, I had my document up still. Motion carries. Thank you. I will email that language to you and the clerks. Thank you again all for participation. Our next item is, yeah, we can. But before we do the break, the next item is about updates to municipal ordinance related to code enforcement. If you wanted to stay, but by all means, I will call a 5-minute recess. We'll reconvene at 7:48. You're welcome to exit. Yes, so we are on item D, which is now on for discussion or approval. Draft updates to municipal ordinance, chapter 9.
Good evening again. Just leading up to this is mainly a cleanup and some updates. Worked a lot with the Housing Commission, several others, doing this update. Our legal has seen this. The clean copy is has come out of legal. There will be a couple other tweaks. I'm not sure if Elaine wants to speak a little more to that, as we've been discussing short-term rentals. This draft has some definitions, but there's a couple tweaks to that you will see before or during the public hearing, leading up to the public hearing. So my goal tonight is just quickly lead you through some of the changes, and if you're so inclined to set a public hearing, we'll go there. So on page 3, some of the we looked at a lot of the definitions. There is a difference between a cellar and a basement. Guest, again, we're starting to talk and realize the short-term rental definitions. Guest is there, host, and the operator, those sorts of things are in the short-term rental world that you're all going to be working on in the coming weeks and months, trying to capture. So we're just being proactive and putting it in this document. We may in fact have to revisit these documents as we get finalized on the short-term rentals. Greenbelt, again, there is a huge focus in this update on our ability to deal with garbage, waste, blight on the street, if you will, and or on properties where we're seeing things other than household garbage. So we're seeing wood, cars, construction debris, that sorts of, those sorts of things. Our previous ordinance was weak, and so we're taking advantage of trying to strengthen that and give staff more tools and more resources to deal with the concerns that we've heard. We've brought in the new lead law pieces, the inspection, repair, and cleaning practices, and the inspection, repair, cleaning practices certificate. So not only are people having to fill out certificates, they're also, during construction, there's now a certification which contractors need to work in older buildings if it meets the, the definition of, the lead law, if they're replacing windows or doing renovations. So, the state strengthened that. Again, we're not being more restrictive than the state. Whether it's our building codes or these codes, we are doing what the state adopts. Things like normal wear and tear seems pretty simple, but we get into those debates with folks. What is normal wear and tear? So we took a shot at trying to define that on page 4. Roof, what's a roof? Again, we find ourselves in the debate of what's a roof, what's an attic. So again, we're trying to, define those. The idea is to allow people to advocate for themselves and educate themselves. To don't always have to interact with staff. They can, again, go advocate and educate themselves. On the bottom of page 5, you're seeing the short-term rental piece. That language may change by the time it comes to the public hearing. We're working as quickly as we can with that. It's interesting to see how that's going to mesh into not only this code, the housing code, but the public building registry parts of our code. On page 6, skilled manner is a big one that we looked at. We spent a lot of time on this because how you fix something and I fix something are very different. So we wanted to define that and try to get a baseline. So it isn't me versus you. We're in the code. It's defined. I have some, we have a document that we can go to, some history in the document. This isn't language that we just dreamed up. This is this comes from best practices in the construction building world, those sorts of things. On to section 905, if no one has questions. Actually 906, sorry, service and notice of the violations. You heard me say in the public building registry, our ordinance previously told us to notify all landlords and tenants of every inspection by registered mail, that sorts of thing. We're not resourced, we're not staffed for that. So in working with our legal, the first inspection, our general inspection, when we go and say there's a missing smoke detector, we're going to informally, through our process of having our iPad and doing the inspection, having the owner agent sign that inspection, that's the informal notice that we've given him or her that there's a violation and they're in a 30-day kind of correction mode. If we go outside that 30 days and or we start enforcement, then we would notify the tenants, right? Because it may eventually impact their ability to stay there. Or it may put them in harm's way in some cases. So it's kind of a tiered system in which we're going to use. Obviously, if there's immediate life safety issues, we will notify the tenants. But as a general rule, we're going to deal with the owner operator and go through the process. Questions so far? I just highlighted, so excuse me while I flip through the document. I'm going to fly over to page 14. Again, we spent a lot of time in garbage and rubbish and sanitary. A lot of property complaints, and this goes to the community risk reduction, right? How can we reduce people's concern of public health of having trash on the green belts and in the roads and streets and sidewalks? So we really focused on how we can give staff the resources to deal with that. This does limit people's ability to leave their roll-out totes on the city green belt. Again, it defines the city green belt and city right of way. They're allowed to be out the day of pickup, and then they need to be put back. Are we gonna go around the city and start writing tickets for this? Likely not. We know our problem areas. Most people are very respectful and accountable for that, but we have some that are not. And this will give staff the ability to not only deal with the immediate concerns, but also hopefully keep it from happening in the future.
Chief, do you want questions at the end, or can I?
However you folks want.
Have you all discussed a minimum amount of trash cans for a unit? I ask because there are some streets that I notice at trash collection day where the trash is like pouring out of the few trash cans that are outside of like a multi-unit building. So I'm assuming there's just not enough trash cans for the dwellings.
So we have not, Burlington does that, right? Burlington says if it's an XYZ unit, you have to have XYZ container. What I would say is this ordinance allows us, if we see that happening, that staff would now have the resources to require that to be picked up more frequently, which would likely lead to the owner-operator getting a bigger container or something like that. Again, I just highlighted the 9.17, just because we spent quite a bit of time in trying to deal with, concerns. And there's probably 3 or 4 properties when this ordinance kind of goes into effect that will help staff and help alleviate some valid concerns that your constituents have, in the community. That our current ordinance just doesn't give us the resources to deal with. So, other than that, it's really, we reformatted the chapter. Again, under legal's advice, we kind of looked at how we approach a building. It doesn't make sense to start the ordinance with looking, at the roof if we start looking at the foundation type. Just some operational pieces to help the people responsible to be able to, again, advocate and educate themselves.
Looked to me like not a ton of changes since the last time we saw it.
There's not. And I really want to reiterate that, Winooski codes are not more restrictive than what the state adopts. We do the National Electrical Code, the Plumbing Code, NFPA, and the Vermont rental codes. So when this ordinance requires a screen in a window it's the Vermont rental code that is so anywhere in the state, people are required to do that. It's not enforced everywhere in the state, and I think that's what sets us aside of some of the quality of life issues. And I hear that we miss the mark some days, and that's this minimum is not hard to obtain in the right circumstances. So typically there's something going on, right? We have an absentee landlord, or it may be overcrowding, or it may be the age of the building. So I feel this ordinance is fair to, does it do enough in some instances? No. Do I think it's a fair, equitable ordinance on both sides? I do.
Bryn, I see your hand.
Thanks. Let me just get the right page. Section 9.16D, looking at a minimum heating temperature requirement. So I can't help but think about like a minimum cooling temperature requirement. And if, as we look at climate change and impacts on adverse impacts that excessive heat has on on households and homes that are unable to cool adequately. If there's been any consideration to have a similar requirement for the ability to cool, if there's a certain temperature exceeded, outside.
So admittedly, I've never heard of such code. The state does not have such code. Something I can research more and try to better understand.
Yeah, it looks like Houston, Texas has one, and some other areas in the United States that do have excessive heat more on a more frequent basis, but again, just kind of advocating for our rental population and kind of being forward thinking about climate change and just starting the conversation of, is that something that would be worthwhile to advocate for our rental population, especially considering that housing quality as it is poor. And I don't know what percentage of homes in Winooski are weatherized, but that you know, those factors, how adequately there's air sealing and insulation impacts the temperatures inside the homes as well. So again, I noticed that in here and wanted to have the at least bring to light that having a cooling temperature may be something that we should consider in the not too distant future as well.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions, comments from council?
I sent one question ahead, and this might be another one that is a little bit for the nearer future because it involves short-term rentals. But I was wondering, would a change in a unit from like a long-term rental to a short-term rental count as a change in use and kind of trigger that need for an inspection, or are they similar enough that that wouldn't be the case?
I think we're discussing that as far as with Eric, with zoning and.
Yeah, we can look more into it as we're getting into the short-term rental details.
I don't know, yeah, I don't think that the use will change, but we're potentially talking about increase in inspections, so I think that would potentially change, but yeah, I think that the use would technically be dwelling unit Eric left, so I'm pretty sure that is what the use will remain.
Thank you.
Any questions from members of the public, either in the room or via Zoom? Okay. Looking for a motion to set a public hearing for our December 4th meeting, understanding that short-term rental language may be updated by then.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Thomas, second by Charlie. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
We are on to item E, non-union wage plan revision. Jesse is online. Welcome.
Thank you. All right, I'll keep it pretty simple. So we're looking to approve an update to the language of the non-union wage plan. The non-union wage plan was last approved by council on November 5th of 2018, and this policy is required to be reviewed every 5 years. The proposed revision addresses a few issues. Firstly, it brings temporary and seasonal employees into the non-union wage plan. This category currently covers lifeguards. So every summer, since we have the pool open now, we'll be able to have the lifeguards in there. It separates out non-union police employees in their own sub-pay plan. This is justified given their significantly different responsibilities compared to other city non-union employees. It relieves some payroll compression by having the step increases match those of the FOP agreement. It addresses the concern by our police chief executive search firm that the starting pay for the chief's position would not attract quality candidates. And it adds clarity in a few other sections. This will not cost any additional money in the current fiscal year. However, long term, this does increase the earnings potential for the police non-union positions.
Thank you. Any questions from council?
I have a question.
Thomas?
In the the knowledge, skill, and experience section, we've got amounts of years of experience that are being equated to a specific degree. I'm just wondering how we landed on those years of experience, and if they're, well, I'll find out how first.
That was in the previously adopted version of this policy. That was created by, I believe, Julie Hulbert, and so every year of education is the equivalent of 2 years of experience.
Have there been any thoughts about reducing those years of experience? As a college graduate with a master's degree myself, I don't necessarily know if I would have taken 8 years of work experience to learn what I learned while I was getting a bachelor's degree. Could have learned it probably in 2 years.
I think it's going to depend on the requirement. We don't have many jobs here that specifically require like a master's degree. I think mine is one of the few jobs, and I can tell you that I would have needed that much experience to learn what I learned in college. Most of our jobs do equate experience within the job description as well.
So are most of our jobs requiring an associate's degree, or would you say a bachelor's degree? Because I get that a master's degree is an exception.
I don't think most of them are either of those either.
Okay, so the
Most of them aren't required. A lot of them are. It could be a combination of education or equivalent experience. It's not one or the other. It can be a combination. It can be just experience. It can be education, but it's open to a lot of interpretation there. It's not a required one to have the degree.
Also not required to have the years of experience as well then?
No, it's any combination thereof. So if the job here just required a master's degree, but you had a bachelor's and a couple years of experience, it could be equivalent.
Thank you.
Bryn?
So there's no financial impact, that's summary that's provided with this agenda item. Based on our current workforce now, what would the increase, to the general fund be with these changes?
There is no increase with the current workforce. They would slot into this current pay plan at a new step compared to where they are in the existing pay plan. So the only thing that would change is over time, they have a higher earnings potential. Specifically, currently our lieutenants will cap out next year at step 15. This revision to the pay plan puts them in the middle of their pay bracket around step 7 or 8. So they have an additional 7 or 8 years of earnings increases over time, rather than capping out next year and only earning COLA.
So for the FY budget estimate, what percentage increase on the budget would be needed to cover that change?
No different than what was going to be in the proposal. I've already done the analysis. It's essentially the same year over year. There's no change to next year's budget based on this.
Is there any logarithmic increases after next year?
They're in a new step plan. So their annual step increases would be now set and increase. But that would be built into all future year budgets. And I can't estimate how much that is because it's also impacted by cost of living increases.
So no ability to forecast at all?
Not at this time.
Okay.
I have not done any of the background information on that.
Okay.
It's for me an acceptable unknown variable. Like we never know what benefits are going to cost based on people's elections. We could have vacancies. We could have people with different skills and experience levels. So we can't know specifically what we're going to pay every year.
And we were experiencing a pay compression issue with these specific positions where in order to come out of the union and enter into a leadership role at the lieutenant level, you needed to start halfway through the pay scale to even consider coming out of the union. Otherwise, you would automatically take a pay cut, in addition to never being able to earn overtime again as an exempt employee.
Yeah, I appreciate that you're able to find a solution for that. I think you need incentives to move into a leadership role. And also that this pulls in temps and seasonals, creating more pay equity for our staff. I am generally supportive of these.
I have a follow-up question.
Sure.
So that last comment, Angela, making sure I understood what you said, exempt employees are now eligible for overtime?
No, they are not. So in addition to no longer being eligible for overtime, in order to come into the non-union pay plan, we had to start somebody very high in the pay scale around step 9 or 10, or they would be taking a pay cut. And so it would limit their ability to continue having step increases as a leadership member, rather than just staying within the union.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yep.
Are there any questions from members of the public? Does someone want to make a motion to approve the non-union wage plan revision?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Thomas, second by Aurora. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain?
Abstain.
Abstain. Okay, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item F, Small Business Saturday Proclamation. Elaine, are you introducing? Should I?
Oh. I was just gonna read from the cover sheet if you'd like me to do that.
Sure.
So Small Business Saturday is an annual thing. The city of Winooski has been invited again to participate, to demonstrate our commitment to our small local businesses. The date is set nationally, so that's November 25th, 2023, is Small Business Saturday. And it draws national attention to the important role that small businesses play in boosting in our economy, creating jobs, and maintaining our neighborhood character. And it's generally supported by Downtown Winooski as an event. So we have a proclamation that was offered by the organization Small Business Saturday, and a fact sheet there if you're interested in more data.
Thank you. We've been doing this for as many years as I've been here. Any questions, comments?
Could I add to the whereas?
It is a draft.
Or maybe include it in the second whereas the majority of businesses in Winooski are locally owned small businesses.
I would support that addition.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments from members of the public? Would someone like to make a motion to approve the Small Business Saturday Proclamation with Thomas's edit?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Charlie, second by Thomas. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, item G, legislative priorities. So last year, we put together a letter to send to our state legislators outlining priorities we would like to see them implement in the legislative session. The deputy mayor and I met with both of our local state representatives to update last year's version, removing things that had been accomplished, and then updating based on any new information they had. So this is a draft. I'm hoping to get input from y'all, and then at our next meeting in December, we could finalize and send it off ahead of the new session to help guide our representation. I want us to keep in mind that this is already pretty long. Maybe there's already too much here. It's ideal to be focused on a few actionable priorities to really get the attention and maybe get some action. So if there's anything folks would want to see add, removed, or changed, let's discuss. Bryn?
Yeah, I'd like to add a request to have the legislature allow municipalities to have more authority over adjusting their local options taxes. Right now, it has to go through legislative review.
I think there is a bill on that that was introduced in the past.
It'd be great to encourage that we are in favor of it.
Do others support that?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I also reorganized this from last year. We are leading with our housing priorities and what we would like to see in addition to the Home Act work, particularly wanting the state to also focus on creating the larger family size housing. Then renter protections come next. That is, I have heard that that is on the docket for action this session. And then more of like the safe, healthy, connected people area of focus. And then finally, some things related to education. Want to make sure that the education funding formula, that work carries through, as that will have a significant impact on our tax base and our schools' resources.
I had a couple things.
Sure.
And yes, acknowledging that it's all already very long. One of the items, I think it's the first in the housing quality. Item 1, I'm wondering if we really need the final sentence.
About a study on evictions process?
Yeah, because
I added that in following the tenants training sessions at the school. A couple of tenants who showed up to that meeting, and then another that I encountered in the community, were talking about being endangered by neighbors in their apartment complex.
Okay.
And the landlord unable to get them out. I could call that out more strongly, that it's about.
Yeah, I think my main concern is the issue with not paying rent, because I feel like that's not necessarily, like, that could be more like a cry for help or someone who needs support. The hazard, I
Yeah.
understand.
I can take that out also, because there's funding to help folks in that situation, so
Exactly.
they should be accessing that first before.
Yeah, before they work on evicting someone. So that was one thing. Other, I think, is in the more safe, healthy, connected. I was wondering with item 1 on the, which calls out like the language access plan.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, sorry, item 2 where we talk about the community media, I was wondering if there should be just like a shout out to like the Language Justice Project as an example of that work.
I had that before.
Oh.
Took it out, but I'll put it in there.
I think it's a good example of some of the importance, and I don't think it would take too much more words. Item 3, I was wondering about making it more general, if there's like specific reasons why it's that, but I think like there's need for more accessible and better language access for training in other fields too. I think I was specifically thinking about fire and teachers. Like I would love to see some more flexibilities and alternatives that take into account our diverse communities' lived experience.
Yeah, so this has been focused on the Vermont Police Academy because that's been a specific issue raised by our staff. We could add a sentence on naming that we need flexible pathways for these other careers too.
Yeah.
When is the chief still here? I think a lot of the, I'll just ask you. Most of the training that y'all do for new firefighters, you do that internally, or is there an academy that you also send folks to?
So we currently require 80 hours, which is done at the county level. That is not recognized by the state. If we go to Fire 1 cert, which most departments do, that is about 300 hours. So for Winooski, if we start paying people to go do that, becomes a pretty expensive piece, especially when people are staying on the average of 3 to 5 years. The payback is not all that great. So we do an 80-hour class locally, and then that kind of preps people to challenge the Fire 1 if they choose to move on and that sort of thing. We give them an opportunity to go do it, but they're doing it on their own time.
Gotcha. So at a state level, that might not be
their purview.
Yeah.
I mean, I could just add a line that, like, all state certified professions should have a flexible pathway.
Yeah, I think that's great.
They're hearing that certainly on the fire and EMS side. They're hearing it's not just Winooski, it's statewide, right? There's a huge shortage. It's not just the state of Vermont, but it's across the country. And why is that happening? When I came into the service 30 years ago, I was able to do modules and get my certification, but it allowed me to get on the job, and it was a career path. I didn't have to go right to college. I could do these modules and work up through, and look where I am today, right? And somewhere along the way, the state did away with that. And we're coming full circle, and they're hearing loud and clear that they need to create some flexibility.
Thank you for that context.
Yeah.
The one other item is more of a new one, but it sounds like it might already be being dealt with at the school. I didn't know if we wanted to call out specifically thinking about civics trainings, or maybe just making various civic resources more available and in more languages.
Did you want to share an update on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is definitely something that the state has a priority on. I was able to connect the Secretary of State's office with the school district.
Okay, that's what
That said, I mean, I don't know if we want to call out our support in it, because it is already happening, but it is happening, and I know the state wants to grow the program, so I also don't know if we want to add to making it longer when we know it's something that the state does want to do.
Yeah.
I mean, fine either way.
I could add it, there's the commendation here on the education funding formula. I could also include efforts to bring civics education.
Yeah.
Anyone else have comments? Are there any questions, comments from attendees? Okay. Thank you. This is just on for discussion. As I said, I'll bring it back to our next meeting with these edits for approval. Item H, finally, the Burlington-Winooski Bridge Replacement Project update and presentation. John and I assume multiple guests?
Just hang out, just watch.
Should we use the panels, I guess?
Welcome, everyone.
That's one of the mics over.
Are those taped down?
Oh, they might be.
Excellent, there we go.
Because we do have.
I can take care of that.
Yeah, we have an extra up here.
Oh, microphone.
Appreciate the sticker on your last one.
Thank you.
What's the sticker?
Of course.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, I
And-
didn't.
How come I don't have a sticker? You have a sticker?
You didn't bring the sticker?
I don't.
No, they've got.
I closed it too.
Oh, now
I just had
Now
to.
it is.
I'm
All
sorry.
right. So we'll run through this a little bit. It's not much different than the public meeting that we had about 2 months ago. So if you were there, you're going to be fairly aware of what's going on, but I'm going to walk through for awareness. Take questions at the end. We'll do questions at the end.
Okay.
Good. So sitting around the table with me tonight, we have Bob Kleinfelter, VTrans Project Manager, Carolyn Coda, VTrans Structures Program Manager, myself, Josh Oland, I'm an HNTB Project Manager, and Berta Town with VHB. I think Judith might be online. As far as the agenda goes today, it's going to be just a quick overview of where the project is. We're going to walk through past, current, and future efforts that we're doing. And then just a little bit on what I call project delivery, just how we're kind of putting it all together. So starting off real quick with the project location, I think most people are aware where it is. It's kind of a little bit off center to the left on the screen everybody sees with a big yellow box around it. Taking a closer look here, kind of a bird's eye view of the project itself, we can see the bridge crossing the river, several mill buildings around the area. We have a dam off to the side, many different buildings on the south side in Burlington as well, and of course the circulator up there just kind of poking off the screen. But to really try to capture what this project is, I've tried to pull it forward and highlight it here. So this is essentially the limit of the project that we're here to talk about. Might go a little bit beyond this one way or another, but that kind of puts a boundary around what we're looking at. And really within that, there's two focal points. There's the bridge itself that crosses between Burlington and Winooski, and then we have the intersection that's wholly in Burlington. We're not really talking about the intersection tonight too much. They do play together and they will be one project, but our focus tonight's really the bridge. So I wanted to walk through past efforts, right? We're here today, November 2023, but a lot has already happened. So every project goes through kind of a three-step phase in its life. The first phase of it's the project definition, trying to figure out what it needs to be. For this project, this phase happened back in about the April 2017 timeframe through May 2019. And really that overall phase tried to define the purpose and need. That's really figuring out what the project what the needs are of a project, and then kind of setting the goals of what it needs to accomplish. It went through, had a public meeting, had project advisory committee meetings, town council or city council meetings, went through and had a traffic study, an alternatives evaluation, and eventually came out with a preferred alternative being defined. 2 reports came out of that phase. The first one's the bridge scoping report. This really summarized all the efforts that occurred to making that project definition recommendation. And the second was a bridge grant application. That first one, that bridge scoping report, was wrapped up in 2019. Like I said, it's a big summary of all the efforts that occurred, all the different meetings, the data gathering, the alternatives assessment, and really at the end of that report recommended a bridge replacement. Complete replacement, not reusing anything. A big focus of that report and the recommendations was a huge focus on bike ped accommodations. You'll see that over and over again, and it's part of what we've been talking about too with the public. And it also got a little bit into the conceptual construction methods to try to identify what are those next steps? It didn't get specifically into looking at site impacts and specific durations, but a concept of how it could be put together. That overall report also talked a little bit about what the replacement should look like. So on top here on screen, we have the existing bridge, roughly 57 feet out to out. It's got 4 travel lanes, 2 6-foot sidewalks. The recommended replacement is closer to 78 feet. It's not specific, it's not perfect, but it's in that ballpark. The big emphasis, that big change in that roughly 20 feet is really in those shared use paths. You can see they went from a 6-foot sidewalk to a 12-foot path each side, plus there's barrier separation that adds another roughly 3 to 4 feet to the overall bridge width. The rest is within those travel lanes, going from about 10.5 feet to 11 feet, and giving little 2-foot buffers to the sides because we're introducing a barrier next to cars and we need that snow storage, that drainage, etc. From that point, efforts turn towards securing grant money. So a bridge grant application was prepared, which we have the cover shown here, and those obligations associated with getting the money was to improve safety, address bike ped accommodations, complement the natural surroundings, and provide an appealing bridge. So that all happens before. So we know where we're going with the project, we know what it needs to look like, we have a path forward. So now we're talking about current effort that started really back in about February or so, and they're expected to last until about mid-2026. That's what we call the project design phase. It's when we really put the project together so it can be constructed. All the things you see here on the right side typically happen during this project design phase. We happen to be focused on about the top 4 at the moment. Certainly there's overlap in everything that's happening here with coordination, but our big focus is on these top 4 here. Refining the preferred alternative, getting through the preliminary design, more traffic control analysis, and starting that right-of-way process. So I wanted to just walk through that pretty quickly. We are starting to refine that alternative. As I mentioned, it is going to be a full replacement. It's going to have 4 lanes, and it's going to have bike ped accommodations. But there's little nuances throughout that entire thing that we can change slightly. So going about this takes a lot of interaction with the public, stakeholder engagement, property owner meetings, talking with utilities, and talking with the environmental coordinators. And the little, conversation bubbles you see there are just some of the things that we're starting to hear, starting to learn about, and starting to take into account in the design. That preliminary design is also ongoing, so these are kind of concurrent efforts. We received a ground survey back in, I think, the May timeframe that really put all the different horizontal constraints and vertical information all on one screen for us to really figure out what's going to happen with the bridge and what we're really going to impact and have to relocate. The bridge and the intersection were scoped separately. Those went through that project definition phase separately, so we're looking at combining those into one project and making them merge together and work. And now we're also starting to look at constructability and impacts and sequencing a little bit deeper too to understand how this project gets put together. And I mentioned that the scoping study got into that constructability a little bit, and within that report they actually recommended something called a lateral slide technique, which is what this diagram on the right is trying to show. So if you bear with me for a second, if we want to start with the top image there, this is looking from Winooski back towards Burlington. Step 1 would be to build a little piece of the new bridge off to the right, so you can see kind of a little piece off to the side there. We build that little piece that would be used for pedestrians. That would be one of those shared use paths. Once that's in place, we transfer utilities over. We would then go upstream of the existing bridge and build the rest of the bridge, be on temporary supports. And then during a bridge closure, we would close the bridge to all traffic, maintain pedestrians on the little piece that's already built, demolish the existing bridge, and slide the new one in place. So the new bridge would be more or less back where it is today. But of course, doing a bridge closure for, say, 4 to 6 weeks really impacts a lot of vehicles. So we're not taking that lightly. We are doing a lot of maintenance of traffic analysis to really figure out what's the best solution, how can we mitigate congestion to the extent practical. There's 25,000 vehicles out there, 300 pedestrians. We know we need to balance impacts to the traveling public but also to the safety of the construction workers on site. That's definitely a necessity. That's going to help drive productivity and keep costs in control. So in order to do that, we are looking at utilizing a handful of different scenarios. You know, I've got a diagram at the bottom that shows several different lane closure and bridge closure type options we are investigating to understand what's going to be the most effective methods. That is going to be an ongoing effort. In doing so, of course, we need to figure out how many crossings are there over the river, what are the different traffic volumes, what are their capacities, and if we were to send people to one of these other locations, what does that do to all the other intersections that they have to drive through to get back home at the end of the day? The most obvious detour is using I-89. It's right off to the side, it's the shortest detour out there, but that only accommodates vehicles. So we know no matter what we do, we still need to maintain pedestrians on site at all times. So that is definitely a factor that's going to be in all of this. I'm showing the shortest detour possible end to end of the bridge. That's not to say this is going to be the final detour, especially down perhaps around the UVM hospital. But we also need to look at what's happening with all these different intersections as well and see if we need to find ways to encourage people to go elsewhere on their commutes. And finally, we're also starting the right-of-way process. This is kind of an evolving process. It starts with just figuring out who owns what, getting all those boundaries mapped, starting to talk with property owners about potential impacts and things that we might not be aware of, and then going forward from there with appraisals and eventually offers and negotiations. So this is just beginning, but of course it'll take us all the way through to right up to construction. So that's a quick snapshot of what we're working through at the moment. Obviously, I mentioned there's future efforts within this phase as well. So utility relocation, environmental coordination, and something called RFQ, RFP development, which is kind of some acronyms for design build contracting, which I'll get to in a couple slides here. So utility relocation, just a quick map off to the side here showing that there's a lot of stuff buried out there, lots and lots of utilities. We have a pretty good handle based on record plans, but those aren't perfect. So we do have plans coming up to get out there and do some test pits. We are working with Department of Public Works, trying to figure out the best time to do this, what the traffic impacts are going to be, and what the best bang for the buck really is at the end of the day. That'll help us better identify what's out there, avoid conflicts, and avoid surprises during construction, which always leads to more money. As we work through the final preliminary designs, we are starting to talk to the utility companies about relocation plans, construction sequencing, getting utility agreements in place eventually. And I do want to point out that municipal utility relocations are project reimbursable. One of our next steps as well, though a lot of it's ongoing at the same time, is to get into environmental permitting and getting some commitments in place. And there's a lot of different permits on this project, but one in particular that I wanted to talk about was the 106 process. So I'm going to hand it over to Britta for a second to talk about that.
Okay, hi everyone. So I'm a historic preservation consultant, and we are helping this project navigate two regulatory review processes. One is called Section 106. That's a federal review process. It's really consultative in nature, and it involves a lot of public input. It involves, just really making sure that a federal agency, in this case, it would be like a funder, a grant funder, and any other federal agencies that might be involved, Army Corps, that they're considering the effects of the project on historic resources. And we all know the bridge is very historic, very significant, built in 1928 after the 1927 flood that destroyed a lot of infrastructure around the state. So that process will, really allow us to consider the effects of the project on the bridge, which we know will be adverse because the bridge is going to be gone. And then through that, there will be mitigation proposed. And some of that, with this design build process will be kind of creating some parameters, stipulations for the final design to make sure it's really going to be compatible with the historic environment, and also to make sure that there's going to be no unnecessary impacts to historic properties that could be avoided with certain design considerations. And then we have section 4F, and that's not listed here, but that is a more substantive process by which the federal agency, in this case Federal Highway, they're really required to select an alternative that has the least amount of impact on a historic resource. We all know the bridge has to be replaced. All these studies have shown that. So that's not the problem. It's really just demonstrating why and how this new bridge will be, you know, compatible with the historic environment and really similar to Section 106. So there will be ongoing involvement. This is also, you know, throughout the design process, consultation with the Vermont Division for Historic Preservation, and they will be reviewing all of our materials and, again, a public process too, to collect feedback. And that will dovetail into a lot of the other outreach that will happen. Thanks.
Which segues nicely into the design build contracting stuff here. So I mentioned design build and developing an RFQ and RFP, the request for qualifications and request for proposals. Basically, it's asking contractors to submit kind of a bid package to us to select from in order for it to move forward with construction. So what is design build contracting? How is it different? So design build contracting actually puts final design and construction under one umbrella, one lump sum cost that the contractor is responsible to complete. It also, in doing so, places additional risks on the contractor because they're generally better to control those risks and helps to reduce the costs to the state in doing so. Generally speaking, it promotes innovation, improves design construction efficiencies, typically lowers construction costs and lowers construction schedule. So just kind of a quick comparison, typical design bid build in which the state would go through and completely design the entire project to the point where they can hand to a contractor to simply construct. Looks generally like you see on screen here. Lots on VTrans plate, contractor does construction, which I know waters it down, they do a lot. The little arrow down below shows kind of when the contracting would happen as well, right? So the state would go through and define the project, do the coordination, do the design, and then we'd get to the contracting. Design build contracting shifts some of those obligations, some of those responsibilities from VTrans over to the contractor and shares several others, and in doing so pulls that contracting forward. It gets them to be on site a little bit faster and gets them building the project a little bit faster, and you can see we're in that coordination phase. So what does this mean? I know Britta kind of mentioned it a second ago with 106, but this kind of goes across the entire board. We are developing essentially a set of guidelines, a set of specifications that the contractor needs to work within to complete this project. It needs to be encompassing enough that we know at the end of the day we get what we want, but it provides them flexibility to be innovative with their designers so they can actually use their equipment, use their comfort zones, their means and methods to drive construction schedule and reduce cost. But at all times, we're always maintaining a checks and balance system with the contractor to make sure it's going to be a safe bridge that everybody can feel proud of. So then segueing here into the project delivery, just a couple slides about the project. Kind of mentioned the schedule a little bit. We talked already about the project definition phase really starting back in early 2017 here. And that project definition phase wrapped up in 2019 and transitioned into trying to secure some funding. Moving forward here, you can see we're starting off this next scale of the timeline. We're in that concept design phase. We are refining the preferred alternative. We're still collecting input. We're still doing our due diligence, our design, our impacts. All of that's going to be used to then transition into those environmental commitments, right-of-way and utility clearances before we can really put out some paperwork to contractors for them to bid on the project. From there, we start getting into construction. Probably won't see much in way of breaking ground until about mid to end of 27 as a guess at the moment. And then construction is anticipated to last about 2 to 3 years, which would put final touches on site sometime in middle of 2030, final site restoration, plantings, and so forth. And then project costs, I mentioned we did get a raise grant that was valued at about 24.8 million. The total project costs, including the intersection, engineering, everything else about it, is going to be in that $60 to $80 million range. We're still very much in the conceptual phase, so we need to refine that number as we go forward, but that's a projected number. The bridge itself is going to be split. That's the upper pie chart there. It's going to be split with 80% federal, 10% state, and 5% to each city. The intersection itself is 100% federally funded. And with that, I will open it up for questions.
Can I ask why the intersection is 100% covered and the bridge is not?
It's well, Mike was here.
Yeah, Mike was here earlier.
He had to leave, but it's related to safety funding.
Safety funding. It's a
Specific
different,
to
it's a different
intersection.
source of funding.
Okay. Do others have questions?
I was at the hearing that you all did. Thank you for that. Also, thank you for hanging out with us all night. And there was a very impassioned conversation from those in attendance about just the walkability and bikeability of the bridge. And I know that, you know, you've spoken about that and you've shown the schematics of it. And I think now, I believe people's concerns are when it gets turned over to the contractor, and if they try to find ways to make things cheaper. It seems that that would be probably a pretty easy place to make things cheaper by reducing that walkability and bikeability. So I just want to make sure that there's a way for, you know, when you express what you want it to look like, that those things are really key in what you want there.
Yep. It will be, because we will be specific as to, it will be two, I'm just gonna use the term, sidewalk bike paths that are gonna be 10 feet wide each side, and that there's gonna be 4 lanes of traffic. Those are specific things that they will have to incorporate into their design and their construction. The typical is the typical. I mean, they can change things a little bit here and there, but the project is we get our 106 based on a certain bridge width and length, and it's the aesthetics and other things that and we're gonna incorporate some of that stuff into what we're gonna say it needs to. We might give you like 3 or 4 examples. We talked about this the other day, and a contractor could select that both cities agreed on these 5, bridge railings. And the contractor can pick what they think will be the best, but that's the nice thing about this. One of the reasons, and one thing that Josh didn't mention, design build is really critical for this project because of the raise grant. So we run a huge risk if we don't obligate the construction funds in 2026. If we don't obligate those funds on time, we will lose the $24 million. So the best way for us to move forward is by doing this design build effort, because it allows that final design and the contractor to be working together, but we've obligated the construction funds. So it is really critical. And we've had a lot of success with design build projects here in the state of Vermont.
And we can be as stringent as we want.
Yep.
with the specifications, but, it's a delicate balance of, if we're too specific, that's how we normally do business, and it prevents like Josh mentioned, the innovation and savings and costs. So it's a balance there, but we're very cognizant of making sure we don't leave anything, holes that a contractor is going to poke through that would result in any, like they couldn't reduce the width of the lanes or the path. Those sort of things are fixed. And there's a number of things we can fix that way, and then other things like whether it's steel girders or concrete girders, that's the sort of thing where we probably would leave it up to the contractor, right? Because they can, those sort of things where in the end the bridge functions the same way, but it's, it allows for some savings and costs potentially.
And we will have, the design, just once we have that design consultant and contractor on board, we're still gonna be meeting with them all the time and approval on everything as it progresses through the actual construction all the way to the final construction. This design team, well, I may not be there, but this design team will be a part of that. And we'll also have our VTrans construction staff on board all throughout, and they partake in this whole design build process as well. So it's good.
And I think that's a big component of some of the future public outreach that we're doing. There's going to be several more meetings, and some of that is, I think, looking to the public to see, you know, what are some of these areas where we have flexibility in that, you know, I think one of the comments that came up was having an outlook, like mid-span on the bridge, like a bump out, you know, just to kind of get out of the path of traffic and whether there's a bench there or something. So I think that was an idea that came up, which is certainly something as an example that we could consider. Or there's several other ideas that could come up, but yep. Great. So
That's reassuring.
yeah, yeah.
Are there any questions from members of the public? Again, if you're on Zoom, you can use the chat or raise hand feature. Bryn?
So I was wondering if VTrans has looked into or considered the per capita cost of a split 5% share with Burlington. I mean, I know technically we own the bridge, so you know, thank you for all the work that you've done to getting the funds from the federal government and grants and from the state to support this. I'm also, you know, curious on a per capita basis what that 5% looks like for our community versus 5% for the Burlington community, and if there's any additional support that VTrans could offer to help mitigate that impact to our community.
So on any town highway funded bridge project, the town share is 10% for the project. It's in the state statutes. And so in this case, this bridge is owned 50% Burlington, 50% Winooski. So that's where the 5% comes from. It's not based on per capita, it's not based on what it costs for this community versus, you know, with your capita versus city. It's just that you both own the bridge and it's 50%. And I think, and I understand your concerns. We also have communities in the state of Vermont where they have a 10% share and their population may be 700 people, so their tax base is very low, and the bridge project it's not necessarily, you know, $60 million, but it's $10 million, and at 10%, that's a huge impact to those communities as well. So they don't, you know, when they came up with this 10% share at some point, you know, in the state statute, it was just, they looked at the entire state as a whole, and they didn't look at communities and their per capita. So in this particular case, this is a split between the two communities. Now, I know that there is the Act 153, which says that if you detour traffic and close your bridge to pedestrians and traffic, if you do not use a temporary bridge, the share for the project can be reduced can be split. So in this case, it could be split to 2.5% Burlington and 2.5% to Winooski. However, in this scenario, we are maintaining pedestrian traffic at all times. So there's a cost associated with that. Whether that cost is associated with building part of the new bridge to maintain the traffic, it's not a temporary bridge, but it's part of the new bridge. There's a cost associated with building this structure in pieces. So there is no reduction at this point. It's still, I cannot say that your share would be 2.5%, because we're not closing it to everything. Because there's a savings when you close it to pedestrians, to traffic. The construction can go a lot quicker, because we'll be maintaining pedestrians 99% of the time, and there's a cost associated with that. And the whole idea with that Act 153 to reduce the share was to lessen the cost of the project by not putting in a temporary bridge, not staging construction. I've had other communities, I know one community in particular where I had, they were adamant, they wanted the 5% share, and with some of the same reasoning that I've heard around here, but we just could not justify it, and they couldn't get any grants, they couldn't do anything like that.
Carolyn, can I ask who makes that final determination? Because the language in Act 153 is not that explicit.
No, it's not that explicit, I agree. There is something else in the Act 153, and I was trying to draft something for you a few weeks ago. It was really difficult, and I was trying to do the math myself. But there's another thing in there about if you have to increase your tax base to pay for that funding, there's an opportunity to reduce the share.
We will, in fact, have to increase our tax base.
Well,
to
I
pay
know
for
that, but it
this,
has
so.
to be it's a certain number, and I was actually looking at your tax rates and trying to figure it out all myself to see if it was something that you would be eligible for. So in that same statement, in that same area that you found about the Act 153, there's also, I think right below that paragraph, there's a little blurb about that. So, but I don't know if it's enough to make you eligible. Like, I don't know how much you would have to raise your taxes for a future bond, like what that number would be, whether you'd be eligible or not.
And I think, so one thing Josh had put up there, we are looking at several traffic scenarios. Like, closing this bridge is a huge problem for the whole area and impacts on emergency services. So, I mean, just because that's possible, it may not be the best answer for this project, and that's something we're still going through and taking a really hard look at, and we're meeting with the stakeholders, particularly emergency services that will be directly affected by that. I mean, this is obviously a lot of ambulances go over this bridge to get to the hospital, so if that's closed, that's a problem. 89 gets shut down all the time when there's accidents, right? So if this is now out of service, we've shoved 25,000 cars additional onto the interstate, and it's closed. I mean, it snowballs, and the problem is, even if we were to strike the interstate to 3 lanes temporarily, which is something we're looking at, that helps the movement through the interstate, but as soon as you get off it, whether it's in Winooski or Burlington, you have nowhere to go. So, and it all down in through Main Street in Burlington, we met with Burlington Fire last week, and with that being divided up through UVM, that's currently a huge problem for them to get through there with fire vehicles and emergency vehicles, because there's the raised island in the middle. So there's a lot that goes into it. I mean, it was scoped as a closure, but we're not convinced necessarily that that's the best answer for this project. Just it's potentially 4 to 6 weeks, but that could be a significant impact on, just not only just the traveling public getting around, but impacts the life safety as well. So that's something we're looking at, and we can come back once we've have more information on that to share. And then there's also likely some pretty substantial cost savings with phasing the project and some of the traffic scenarios we're looking at. So,
I mean, we're trying to save money, because you have a 5% share as well as Burlington. The state has a 10% share of that total cost, and then federal government's going to pick up the rest. But that's a huge impact on our program. You know, the year that we're building this bridge, there may be no other town highway bridges being built that year, just because it's coming out of that town highway bridge program. So it's significant. So our idea, and another, you know, with design build too, is the hope that there's some constructability, innovation that we're not even necessarily thinking about, that a contractor might be able to do to try and reduce that cost. There's a lot of options.
Well, Carolyn, I appreciate it. I will follow up with you next week on Act 153 stuff.
Yeah, and I will, I already saved the I
Excellent.
have it, so I will send it to you tomorrow or Wednesday. No guarantees tomorrow, but I'm gonna try to do it tomorrow,
Give it an hour.
depending on when I get home tonight, and, yeah, so.
Thank you.
But there is something there.
I see a hand raised in our Zoom attendee list. Paul, if you can bring them over, please.
Hello, good evening. My name is Jacob Uden. I live on West Canal Street. I also attended the September outreach meeting. At that meeting, the majority of residents expressed concerns of the safety, convenience of a pedestrians, bicyclists, and public transit users had been deprioritized. My question for HNTB and VTrans is, when will the residents of Winooski be presented with alternative designs that reflect their feedback?
Yep, so we are digging into the different bike ped accommodations, safety improvements, traffic calming, all that's kind of a focal point at the moment. We're hoping to have that wrapped up and presentable by mid-January as a target at the moment. We haven't set a specific date, but that's the general time frame of when we want to go back to the public and share what we are proposing to move forward with and try to get some other input on other items at the same time.
Thank you.
I think one other thing just to mention, since we have been seeing some comments along that lines about the configuration of the lanes in the shared use paths. So it is sort of fixed with the barrier separation, but at any point in the future, and this bridge will be designed to last for 100 years. So at some point, if the needs of the communities change, that barrier could be removed and the lanes could be reconfigured. So it's not like just because we're putting a concrete barrier there with 4 lanes and 2 12-foot shared use paths now when we build it, that will have to be that way for 100 years. There is an opportunity to reconfigure the use of the width of the bridge down the road. There's a cost with it, but it wouldn't be a substantial cost to move that barrier down the road compared to replacing the bridge.
And that's one of the things that we're looking at, is that, and Laura Wheelock from Burlington is very adamant. She's like, this bridge is to last another 100 years. And what happens in the next 100 years is going to vary, it's going to be different, and we need to be able to go in there and maintain it. The configuration of the girders, whether they're concrete, steel, needs to be a certain way so that you can maintain traffic on that bridge and fix a future section. Right now, it's very difficult to maintain that deck and the existing sidewalk. So that's really the intent. That full width, there's going to be the future. You can change. It's no different than communities trying different lane configurations on their roads a lot. They're like, let's try this and see how it works. And a lot of communities have done that, especially in Burlington and South Burlington. And next thing you know, I just went down Williston Road and there was all these changes tonight. I was like, what's going on? So those kind of things happen a lot. So.
Are there any additional public questions, comments? Council questions, comments? Okay, thank you so much for coming in to present to us. Are you all sticking around for the finance discussion as well? Okay, we'll move on to item I then. VTrans standard finance and maintenance agreement for federal aid projects.
Yeah, we're not going anywhere.
Sorry.
Yeah, but you can go. Bye. Thank you for coming.
Thanks.
It's not your yeah, okay.
So I don't, would it be possible to pull up the agreement? Would that help would the council like us to go down through that?
Yeah, I didn't know
or,
what your questions were, concerns, or
yeah, if there's
besides the 5%.
Yeah, if there's any questions off the bat, happy to answer them, but we can kind of briefly go down through it. I don't know if this is a standard VTrans finance and maintenance agreement with some special changes
Caveats.
made to the, specific to the project that
You're
we
so
can cover.
good,
but-
Josh.
Oh, there we go.
Well, I know, but
Yeah.
Do you want to see it?
I have it on my, we just wanted, if they wanted to share it and see.
Mayor?
Brandon, you have a question?
Yeah, I'm wondering, I guess, question for you and or Elaine. Has our legal counsel reviewed this?
We actually have a couple of questions we're going back and forth, so this is just in case you have questions about it now. We're not asking you to approve it tonight.
Okay, great.
Yeah, anything you want to share that is not part of your standard agreement, you
So-
want to highlight.
Okay.
Can we share on
I think we still can, if you click the Zoom button, I think we can share.
You're asking me to do something that I don't know.
I think we're still sharing abilities. Yeah, the little green button.
Zoom, where am I? Share screen. Okay, right there. This isn't my laptop, so I'm not sure what I'm doing. Okay. So, everything in the beginning, that's typical. I really think this also, signing this agreement, basically it's saying that we're acting on your behalf on this project, the state, through the design, technical support, that you authorize us to obtain all the permits necessary to do this project. Because this is a class 1, typically when we have town highway bridge projects, we ask that you do the detour signing like on a project, but in this case, our contractor will do all detour signing, will do all that work. The other thing is that there is any environmental contamination, so any hazardous materials, there is some known sites here, and that the cost of that is removal of that is non-participating, so it's 100%, has to be paid for 100% from the city if it's found.
And you would be just responsible, like, on the Winooski side? So
Yeah.
it's not like a project as a whole?
So this one is
So-
just Winooski. If
It
they
would-
find something in Burlington, it's just Burlington.
And that's something we were working on. It's a little early to try to put an estimate to that, but we understand there's, a potential cost there that the city will wanna have an estimate on that. So that's something we will prepare when we feel like we have. So we did some borings and soil samples out there yet, and we're still
Analyzing.
waiting on the results of that, as well as there's some historical information as well, but.
Correct.
Yeah, once we have the excavation limits a little more kind of nailed down, we can put a better number to it.
And there are, I know a lot of cities will reach out to the A&R, and there's some programs to help assist you
Yeah, the
in
grant.
paying that grant.
Yeah, I think
paying
there's
for the-
or is it maybe even through the EPA, is it as well? Or I think there are ways to be.
So that
to
they
have
would
that reimbursed.
help, they would
Mhm.
reimburse you for that cost.
Some of it at least, yeah.
So that's in here, this permit. Also that you allow contractors during construction to use your roads without having to require them to get permits, et cetera, so that they can access the project site with their overweight vehicles. And the other thing, if you go to section 16 of this document,
We modified that.
we modified that, so you need to go to
Attachment D.
attachment D.
And that was modified just really due to being a
This-
design-build
yeah.
project. It speaks to our typical design bid build process where we have multiple stages of plan submittals, where with design-build, it's really the conceptual plans which have already been completed, and then moving into the RFQ and RFP.
Right, so section 16 is about cancellation or default, right? So if at any time prior to award of construction, the municipality no longer desires to proceed with the project, then you may request cancellation of the subject to the following conditions. So if the city doesn't approve the conceptual plans, the project will be canceled and the state will reimburse you 100% of all costs. Should you cancel the project, be canceled by you or otherwise not advance to construction because of any act or omission of the municipality, including not exercising its eminent domain powers, then the municipality will reimburse the state in full for 100% of all costs incurred to date for the project. So this is in every finance and maintenance agreement we have. This is in every project. The only difference being is that once you see the conceptual plans, and you don't approve, then you can cancel it, which is not wise, and just because of the raise grant. And also, we can add something
Oh,
else to
yeah,
that.
so I'm working with our contract administration section to add a clause to this, something Burlington brought up, about if one city decides to cancel and the other city would like to move forward, just adding a clause in here, what that would look like, which would essentially be the municipality that would like to move forward would be responsible for the full 10% municipal share. So, but in the event that seems unlikely that that would happen, but I understand with, needing to get bonded and all that, there is a risk there. So, and with the raise grant money on the line, Burlington had brought that up as something, and I talked with John about that. It sounded like Winooski would that made sense to put that in there. So that's part of the reason we're not. That will be added, and we'll get you an updated version here. And we kind of wanted to hold off and see if there were any other overarching questions before we send it back through. But
And then provision 23, we added that.
yeah, so that just, typically we don't do
Do
this,
this.
but being a significant project, the provision 23, it allows for municipally incurred engineering expenses to be reimbursed by the state. So typically that's not a standard, something we include in this, but there's a lot of coordination and legwork on this, where John and Ryan have been
Put a lot of
integral
effort.
part of our team, so that will only continue to be more. And then at the top of attachment B, I can't remember, was there, I feel like we made a change to number 6, but again, that's just, yeah, I think that
We just
had to, again, do with the design build process
Yeah.
and taking out some steps that it really doesn't change what the typical.
And, right, and then attachment E is, we'll talk more about that later, but it's the, agreement for federal aid projects for the right-of-way, since this is a town, project, town highway project. This talks about the acquisition of the right-of-way and what the city's responsibility is regarding that.
Yeah, and then it goes into reimbursement for
Yeah,
legal expenses as
Right,
well.
yeah, that's all reimbursable.
As
Legal
long as it's,
expenses.
there's conditions to it, but yeah, so.
And then, I don't know what other questions you might have regarding this agreement.
We had a question about, what happens if the bond vote fails? Like, is that a factor inside of our control or outside of our control? I know we're discussing that with you.
Yeah, and I think that sort of goes to the clause we're gonna add where, if that were to happen and you can't, so like Carolyn said, the raise grant funding has a hard funding. Those funds have to be obligated, meaning we have to advertise the RFP for construction by a fixed date. So if we miss that, then the $24.8 million is gone. So if I guess in the scenario where the city of Winooski is unsuccessful at getting bonded, and say Burlington, we don't wanna lose out on 24.8 million, so we're gonna figure out a way to cover the 10%. I guess that's more or less what that clause will say, but I don't know.
But we have, I mean, so what's gonna happen as far as billing right now is once the finance maintenance agreement is signed, then the city will be billed 5% of cost incurred to date. And then you'll get bills every month. And sometimes the bills will be, big, sometimes they'll be little. But we also have, we have 3 years to work on the bond being passed. I don't know what happens, how many times you can try to put a bond out for vote. I don't know how, we don't know, that's not our operating, we don't know how that works. There is a risk that you can never get, you don't get the bond passed, but that doesn't 100% apply to the agreement, except, we're gonna add that additional clause in there.
Well, I'm wondering if it falls under 16 or 17 on page 5, or we're wondering that.
Okay, let's look. Oh, page
Cancellation or
5. I'm
default
looking
by
at the wrong
municipality
page.
or because of circumstances out beyond the purchase control.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question,
It
something
is-
I think we can certainly talk about.
I will talk to
Yeah.
our contract admin folks.
And they can run it through our legal section, but yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, John brought that up.
Yep.
Well, right, so cancellation of the project because of circumstances beyond either party's control, if due to beyond the control of the state or the municipality, the project is not constructed, then basically that all costs incurred shall be shared as specified in section 1 above.
So yeah, it couldn't move forward to construction under 17 would be my
Right.
interpretation
So-
of that, but maybe.
Right, in other words, you still would have to pay.
5% of
Right.
where we got to before construction began.
Yeah.
This is too in the weeds.
Okay.
It is too.
Yeah,
We'll let you guys work it out.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
we brought this to you because, one, typically we deal with it and then we go, here, we think this is,
Yeah.
we think this is good, but since VTrans was here tonight, we thought it'd be a good idea to, if you got any questions.
No, I appreciate it because that is, this section about cancellation is, it's nuanced and worth us knowing about.
Right. So, anyway, so we will look a little bit more into that, but I think any changes to this agreement will be pretty minor with respect to.
Yeah, we'll run it by, once we get some language, we'll run it by you guys before we send it through again.
Do you, schedule-wise, do you know roughly when you'd be looking to have this back to us?
Well, let's see, it's a short week, 4-day work week this week.
Yeah.
Next week's
Yeah.
5 days and then it's Thanksgiving, so
Yeah.
with
I
our
would-
staff, I would say probably in a few weeks.
Yeah, and we should
With
have
our-
the draft language. I was working on it with Mel today.
Yeah, we have
so-
that almost ready, we just need to talk a little bit
Yeah.
more.
And it'll have to go through our legal, so that
Yep.
would maybe would be what slow it down.
So I think bigger picture, the expectation is we would be looking to have this signed.
Hopefully by the end of the
fairly
year, yeah,
Sorry,
by the end of the year would be
by the end of
nice.
the year.
If we could get Burlington to agree to cover more of the percentage, I mean
Well, I mean-
hypothetically.
I don't know.
That's something we can ask.
We
too.
can ask.
I mean, if the cities work a deal
Yeah, if the
between
city,
you
yeah,
to
if the
change
city want,
your-
yeah, that can, I mean, that,
The 10%.
so
you're
as
saying.
far as this agreement can be amended every month if we have to. So, yeah, I'm just
Hopefully
saying,
not,
I'm just,
Yeah.
so if we come up to an agreement at some point where the shares get reduced, it's just an amendment to this agreement. That's all it is. And then what happens is, they will work it out so that it's still a total of 2.5, let's just say it reduces to 2.5%, right? You still would only pay 2.5% of everything for the whole project. So if you've been paying 5% all along, then your billing will get reduced, or whatever. It all balances out at the end.
Just so I understand your question, so you're saying if the cities of Winooski and Burlington work together and you guys come up with some split that is not 5 and 5?
Yeah.
I mean,
I mean, that's fine. I
we-
just don't think that's
yeah.
gonna happen.
Well,
That's
well,
all I'm saying,
yeah,
and just
we're-
based on, based on
I
discussion.
think that,
Yeah.
as far as the state is concerned, that's if we receive
Yeah, so,
notice from each
right,
city.
right, no, so
yeah.
this is no different than, we have projects between New Hampshire and Vermont. And our percentage on those huge New Hampshire bridges are a lot less because of where the line is, okay? So there's agreements made. So if you and the city of Burlington make an agreement, that's
Yeah, it would be between you and
it's
the
between you
city.
and them, and then we would just change the share. Because we'd have to do the same thing with the city of Burlington. I just don't see that happening.
Yeah.
But
Well, if the danger is they have to take 10% if our bond fails.
well, yeah, but I'm hoping that doesn't happen. Yeah.
Are there any other questions? Okay, thank you so much for coming in and for staying this late. Am I inviting anyone to executive session? Okay, so we'll do our executive session and then we'll come back for the 2 items we pulled off of consent agenda. So, an executive session has been warned tonight pursuant to Vermont State Statute Section 3132, the negotiation or real estate purchase or lease options. I'm looking for a motion to find that that we should have this discussion in executive session because doing so in the public would, I've lost the words.
Put the city at a disadvantage?
Yes, thank you. Would put the city at a disadvantage.
So moved.
Motion by Thomas.
Second.
Second by Charlie. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. And now I'm looking for a motion to enter into executive session, inviting City Manager Elaine Wong, John Rauscher,
And
Ryan. I haven't seen you here in so long. Ryan Lambert, and then are any of you coming with? All of us.
Anyone on? No.
I don't think there's anyone on there.
That explains why you're all here in person.
I believe Bob is on a plane, so.
Oh.
I think he'll be
Ah.
joining us.
Who's on a plane?
Our attorney.
Oh, okay.
He is not joining?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
Getting on a plane, and I've not heard from him.
That is too bad.
Okay, so we are going to move into executive session. We're going to leave this Zoom line. We will come back to it though to wrap up the last 2 items on the meeting. Okay, we're on new item J, the old consent item E, the Main Street Revitalization Project Professional Services Amendment. Bryn, you had a question on this one.
Yes, and I'll keep it short. This just really surprised me, and perhaps I'm misunderstanding what is going on here, but it feels like council is being asked to provide compensation for services previously rendered. Whereas I would have expected a contract amendment to have incorporated this 2.5 years ago. So am I understanding this correctly, that it's for services previously completed that was not part of a contract amendment rather than services moving forward?
Yeah, that's correct. So we've been fighting them a little, I don't want to say fighting them, but negotiating with them on services. And they've been working sort of on a time and materials basis longer than what the original contract amount that we approved. So it is a request sort of after the fact, after they've kind of closed out their design phase services and have a final tally on the number of hours that they've spent over. So the reason they didn't give it to us early on is because they really didn't have a final tally on the number of hours that extended beyond their base contract. So it is still within the budget that we received during the preliminary engineering phase. I think during that phase, the original engineering budget was like 1.8 million. And then I don't have the proposal in front of me. I think I just lost internet, but I believe now it's like 1.5 with the $78,000 increase. So it's still within the original budget, but they had to wrap up the final design phase in order to figure out how many hours additional they actually had.
This just raises a lot of red flags for me, so my main question is, how do we prevent this from happening again? And so that standard contract requirements are being held to, so that if any contractor that we go into negotiations with goes above and beyond that what is defined within the presumed flat fee rather than cost plus terms, that we should not be expected to provide any back compensation. I understand like VHB is a big player in the area, and you know, there's benefit to maintaining good relationships with them. So I just think at a larger scale, how we can protect the city from these cost overruns without having a formal amendment to capture what's happening and the costs. I mean, the what's provided in here for itemized additional expenses, to me, I would almost want to see like a full itemized, a full hourly inventory rather than a compiled inventory. Just because this just really jumped out at me as concerning.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, like, the original contract, like, they are probably 2 years over on what we all expected this project to take, mainly because of, you know, COVID impacts, right-of-way issues, frankly, grants. Like, we spent a significant amount of extra time getting grants, chasing grants, administering grants that we ended up having to give up. So that was some of the time. Plus all of the private utility coordination. So typically with a project where, you know, we have a lump sum contract versus time materials, it's a lump sum contract. It's like, okay, last year, yep, we're done. This project obviously is probably a little different in that the city's not going to do a project like this for 20, 30 years because it is so massive. Like, it took us 10 years to get here, and now it's taken us another 5 years to design the thing. This isn't a standard project. So 78 grand in the grand scheme of a $23 million project, doesn't concern me as much, given that we are still we're pretty much within budget with what we expected in preliminary engineering.
Yeah, and I guess for me, I don't care if it's within budget or not. It's purely whether or not we're adhering to contract standard best practices with contract agreements, and really, if this was going to extend past the expiration date, it should have had a contract amendment and define parameters around hours and deliverables. So that's to me, again, like, I don't care if we're not expecting a project of this size. I just want to make sure that the city staff is adhering to like best practices with contract negotiations, so that we're just sticking to what is good business practice and best interest for the city. So that's just the larger picture thing. I think, like, fine, I'm glad it's not more than 78,000. This just stood out to me with a bunch of red flags. That's all.
All right. Sounds like something for Elaine to think about later. Do we have a motion to approve Main Street Revitalization Project VHB Professional Services Amendment 2?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Charlie, second by Aurora. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or
No.
abstain? Opposed?
No.
Nay. Okay. Motion carries. Item K, the old consent F, Working Communities Challenge Grant Extension Amendment. Aurora, you had a question.
Yes. And maybe I can follow up. I would love some more clarity on the family room documents on this. I just thought, with the deadline of today too, just to get some more information on that. Sorry, did not expect it to be such a long meeting. Okay, so, the other item that I really wanted to just pull this out as we are entering budget session is just to once more underline, I think one of the key aspects I noticed of this is that without the equity director, the city manager was serving as the implementer. This was not feasible. This is just too much additional work on you. We need that equity director position to do work like this. I am really glad that we're finding ways to use those funds that were granted and hopefully in a way that continues the mission. But to me, just this really felt like it underlined the necessity of an equity director position and something that we should keep in mind as we're going into budget season.
I think, Elaine, when you brought this forward before, you had shared that actually the transfer of leadership to the family room was because they were better positioned to do the work than the city as an entity.
Yeah, and trying to decide what shade of this that is relevant here. Part of it, so there's a couple things. The history, as a reminder at 10 o'clock, 2 years after the fact, is the equity director, the idea was that the equity director was going to get started at the city with this funding, and then once TIF came online, then their salary would come out of there. There were other pressures. If there was a person here, I'd like to think that we wouldn't have cut that, but with the resignation, then that we were scraping corners to try and reduce the tax rate. So that was not going to work out. Also, that person basically had 3 full-time jobs.
Yes.
One of them was the initiative director. And so even with an equity director, I wouldn't support continuing this way. And then tangentially, yes, so it's rare for the backbone organization in the Working Communities Challenge Initiative in the region to be in a municipality because we tend to have an oversized weight. The idea is that it should be really cross-sectoral effort. So I got that instruction from Yasmin, like, this doesn't make sense. And so between the two of us, I think that would have been a goal, is to, like, is there another organization that can more suitably serve as a backbone for this type of thing?
Yeah, and I can appreciate that, but again, thinking about having someone in that role who might have been able to connect with someone else, like the community room, to pass along that funding sooner, and just had is able to work on that, right? And that's why I'm wondering, like, an equity initiatives director in the way that we have a housing initiatives director. Are there more bird's eye view that could connect? That's really what I wanted to bring up here. I appreciate all of that and I understand the history, but it's still, to me, this is an example of why we need this position. I'm glad the work's still being done. I'm glad we're thinking about how to connect with our partners. However, I don't think that eliminates my concern about the work not being done without this position.
Thank you for that comment. Do I have a motion to approve this grant extension amendment?
So moved.
Motion by Thomas.
Second.
Second by Charlie. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion by Brent, second by Charlie. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you all.
Night, Brent.
Bye, Brent.
Bye.